Okay, it is 7:30 on January 18th, time for a regular monthly council meeting, and we are now in session. We have a quorum sitting here at the table, another member online, and a fifth member about to join us in the very near future. So let's begin. The first item on the agenda, something I've been waiting to hear, is a presentation from the compost crew, with whom we have just recently signed a contract to do composting for the village. And the compost crew is here to tell you all about it. So go ahead.
Hello. Well, I don't know about a presentation, but I can
Okay, discussion.
Yeah, no, I'm teasing. I haven't prepared anything, but I can give a quick overview of the program that we're rolling out in the community, the Village of Martins edition, and give a little bit of insight on Compost Crew and what we're doing in the community, and address any questions that anybody has. So we've been working with Michael to get started on a village supported program. We had about 66 subscribers in the village. Since we've opened it up for full support from the community, it's grown to 77 homes, and we collect Wednesday afternoons or Wednesday during the day.
Morning.
Sorry, what was that?
Mornings.
So Wednesday morning.
Wednesday morning, yes, Wednesday throughout the day. The way it works, the registration happens on our site on compostcrew.com, and anybody with a village address can go in and register. We sort of quarantined out the area geographically in our system, so anybody going in will get the specific rates outlined for the village. So you know, we can really, the more homes the better. My understanding is you have about 325 homes in the community. Is that information accurate?
Correct.
So
right.
we're right around 25% of the homes participating, which is good. We're early in the program. That's very good. Some of the neighboring communities have about 45%, which is where we're sort of capping out right now on programs. So we'd love to see some growth, and the efficiency of the program environmentally and economically improves with density. You know, you can imagine that if we're driving a truck through the community and stopping at 25% of the homes, if we're stopping at 50% of the homes, there can be a lower cost per home. So we can see some savings by growing the program and getting more people participating. The food waste is collected in Ford F-350 trucks, so we're using smaller, quieter vehicles that are less disruptive in the community, and obviously more economically sustainable to operate. The waste is going up. I believe VMA is going to Butler's Orchard, where we run a compost outpost. What that is a small scale processing facility. We're mixing yard waste from the community with the food waste that we're collecting, and that's being processed into a compost, which is a soil supplement that can then be used at the orchard to improve their soil quality and their production on the farm. So that's, as I say, a quick overview of the system. Of the program, if there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to address questions.
Yeah, could you mention the give back that you have in the sack?
Yeah, thank you. So we do a spring compost drive. So the finished product is also available to subscribers. So the way that works is anybody that's subscribing will get an email. They can they respond to that email with one of three options, is the way we operate it now. The first option is a delivered bag of compost. The second option is picking up 2 bags. And then if you're an active gardener and you want some more, you can get the equivalent of 3 bags. The bags are about a cubic foot. So you get 1 cubic foot, 2 cubic feet, or 3 cubic feet, depending on how you pick, how you opt into the compost bag. So that's done in the spring. It's great for, adding to flower beds. It's great for, if you're doing any above ground gardening, mixing it in with your house plants periodically to add some nutrients for your house plants. All these things are good uses. The best way to think of compost is like a multivitamin for your soil. It's rich in microorganisms and bacteria that's good for your soil, gives the plants food, and produces, it makes the soil healthy, which makes the plants healthy.
Good. I would recommend, we have gone out to the 1 acre farm to pick up the bulk, taking a garbage can or 2, and putting in my garden. Best tomatoes and beans we ever had last year after that. So, well,
It's,
one question about that. Got an email this week saying that this pickup and delivery process was going to change. Instead of having one, you make an appointment or something, you can request a specific date. How's that working?
that, I don't know of any changes happening with the delivery. There's set dates. The delivery dates will be, will be set, based on the number of subscribers that ask for the delivery. So that sort of happens, in real time as we send out to our subscribers across the, we service from Baltimore City down to Manassas, got 20,000 residential customers. So it's quite a process going through this compost back program. So as you opt in, you'll get an email back saying, here's your delivery day. The pickups are set dates. So we have different locations, like you mentioned, the Butler's Orchard, or you mentioned 1 Acre Farm.
1 Acre Farm, yeah.
1 Acre Farm, we have pickups at 1 Acre Farm, and that's another example of one of our compost outposts where we process. So the bulk pickup is done at 1 Acre Farm because that's the actual compost that we've processed with the food that we bring up to 1 Acre.
Good, thank you.
So there's set dates in the spring, April and May, where you can, if you're opting for the pickup, you can either go to our headquarters in Rockville or 1 Acre, or the sites that we've used locally recently. But those collection sites vary, each year, each spring. So you
Okay.
get emails about that information.
Thank you. Does anyone at the table or any residents have any questions on this?
I have a question. Is there any charge to,
Now there is no charge. There used to be, but now the village is picking up the tab.
right, because I'm not subscribed to it.
Okay,
You should subscribe.
yeah.
It's a great
subscribe.
thing. I've
Yeah,
already saved,
absolutely.
like,
Go into compostcrew.com. There's a subscribe button based on your address in the village. There'll be no charge. You do need to put a credit card in, but that's just because our system doesn't have a ton of flexibility, but you go through and there won't be any charge. The service fees go to the village.
Right, good.
and I think it's important just to stress how much compost, how much refuse is kept out of the landfills. Like I've
Yeah.
done over, I think close to a ton, maybe a ton and a half,
Yeah.
just in the time, and I only have a 2-person household. So I think we could really generate a lot of good compost
Good.
right
Yeah,
here.
there's
in
a
PMA.
lot of interesting, 40% of municipal waste. There you see different data, but 40% of municipal waste. So, how residential household waste is organic matter. So that's yard waste and food waste. A majority of that is food waste. And, some of it is overbuying and throwing away leftovers, but most of it is things like onion skin, banana peels, citrus fruit, coffee grounds, used soiled paper towels, soiled pizza boxes that can't be recycled. Anything that grows, that's actually a good point, is we accept anything that grows. So salmon skin, meat bones, if it's 100% natural, it can be composted. And essentially all that stuff is nitrogen. All the yard waste is carbon. When you mix those two things at the right ratio and they have water and oxygen, it breaks down naturally. It breaks down to about 20% of the waste. So we're putting, at these compost outposts, we're putting about 3 tons of food waste and 9 tons of yard waste into a repurposed shipping container that has forced air. And over the course of 4 or 5 weeks, that breaks down to, like a soil supplement that can go right onto your garden and into your flower beds and everything.
Good. I saw a question from Paula Decio. Paula? Can you-
Yes, thank you. Can you sign up for, we do our own composting. We have since 1991 when we
That's
came
great.
here. But we don't do meats or salmon skins or anything. Can we sign up to do that?
Absolutely. So, there's a hierarchy here. Backyard composting
Sure.
is fantastic because we're not bringing a truck to your house to collect it. But as you say, there's things that you don't want to put in is one challenge.
Right.
And then not everybody has the space. And, I try and do it at home and I put the right ratio in, but I live in DC on a small lot. So getting the right ratio of all the yard waste is hard. I send emails to my neighbors asking for yard waste and
Yes.
by them, but
Yes,
we know
have-
the process. But in answer to your question, yes. So if it's a
Okay.
very small amount, you could certainly do that. Or if you have a nearby neighbor that would take your little bit of waste, you don't want to necessarily, I'm discouraging you from signing up. But if 90% of your waste is going into a backyard system and you just have, a yogurt container or something with some meat that you don't want to put into your backyard system, maybe you could put that into a neighbor's bin.
Good.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from anyone? Yeah, Jeff.
Just a comment, I'm sure like with many around the table and at home, just how grateful, 1 Acres and Butlers has been part of our family for a very long time. So just knowing that
Good.
now it's a topic of conversation with
Right.
the owners when we go there next time. So,
Good.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I will be, just to be fully transparent, not all of our waste goes to our outposts. We're trying to develop more of these outposts so we can process more of our residential waste. But we're growing and collecting so much more waste. A lot of it goes to commercial facilities. There's one in Upper Marlboro, Maryland, and there's another one down in Manassas. And these are the same process, same forced air process. It's just, instead of a compost pile the size of a shipping container, they're the size of football fields. Is really the difference.
my only comment, kind of tongue in cheek, we have 4 rescue cats. So if you can do something with cat litter,
Oh,
we're all for it.
So that's actually a good point and a common contaminant. It's a, not so much cat litter, but a lot of people who have rodents in the wood chips, they think they can put them in. We really do want to keep any kind of feces out of the compost pile. It introduces bacteria. It's safe and we manage it. Essentially the temperature of the pile is regulated so that when it gets up to 150 degrees is your target temperature. And that's just all the microorganisms getting busy, like too many people in a car kind of thing with your windows fogging up. They raise the temperature of the pile. It's a natural process that's happening when a tree falls in the forest. It's the exact same process. But those microorganisms and things, the contaminants are cooked off at the temperature that the piles kept at. But the more you introduce, the more potential you have for problems with the finished product. And the finished product's tested for safety and everything as well. So, but we do want to keep any kind of fecal matter, dog waste and pet waste out of your stream. It is natural, but it shouldn't be composted.
okay, John, go ahead.
John Shiro on Chestnut Street. What do you do with all the green bags? There's got to be hundreds of them.
So yeah, the bags, that's another good point. We use BPI certified as the certification process for fully digestible. It's actually a starch product, so it can be composted. That gets mixed into the compost pile. In the commercial facilities, it stays in. In our system, believe it or not, all those green bags that go into the back of the trucks are hand decontaminated at this facility. So we tip the food waste, we pull, we rip the bags up and we take the bags out and we separate them and send them to a commercial facility. So Butlers and 1 Acre do not process the BPI bags. They do get composted at a commercial facility that gets to a higher temperature and stays at that higher temperature for longer. So the bags are separated out. The reason we use the bags, we'd love to have you don't need to use the bag. If you want to be vigilant and scrub your bag, put some leaves or some wood or some sawdust and something in the bottom of the bin, it's going to come out just fine. That's what a lot of people do. Like I don't want to provide too much information here and take too much of your time, but we have a 1.5 gallon kitchen counter. If you just put a soiled paper towel on the bottom of that, your coffee grounds, your banana peels and everything come out really cleanly. You can do the exact same thing in your larger bin that sits outside. It's just, it's going to take some scrubbing. So the bags aren't necessary, but they make it more accessible to more people.
Interesting. Good. Okay. I think that wraps up. Thank you very much. And I hope we get a ton of subscribers.
Well, I
coming
would
your
say
way
thank
soon.
you very much. You guys are leading the way in supporting the community and diverting your food waste, and it reduces waste going to landfills and incinerators, and it creates a soil supplement that does a lot of good things like sequester carbon, store ground, prevent stormwater. It's an important process, and I appreciate the villages.
Good. Well, thank you for coming and telling us about it. Thank you.
My pleasure. If
Okay.
you have any more questions, I'm available at alan@compostcrew.com. I'd be happy to help anybody out.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Good. Okay. We now have
If you say, is
Keith
this,
Allen.
is this guy?
Go ahead.
Paula raised her hand again.
Oh, she did. Was there another question from Paula? I think that was an old one.
No, I was a comment. I wanted to commend the
Oh.
gentleman who spoke and also the village for doing this. I think it's fantastic.
Okay. Thank you. Good. Keith.
What was the gentleman's name? Was his name Alan too?
Alan, yes, right.
Okay, well, he's gonna be a tough act for me to follow.
Alan,
Very well informed, very intelligent guy. Okay, we're on the eve now of another snow event. But it shouldn't be much more than what we had the other day, a couple, 3 inches. but it will start off colder. So it's gonna be very slippery out there, especially on any untreated surfaces in the morning. I understand that schools have already been canceled, which is smart because this is gonna start early and go throughout most of the day, and then it's gonna get bitter cold for a couple of days. But I got some really good news
Hmm.
because that's gonna be it for a while yet. I'm thinking maybe even until mid-February
Hmm.
before it really gets cold again, if it does at all, or if we have any more snow. So don't count the snow out, but it might be a long time before you see any more snow after tomorrow.
Good, okay.
So another little tip too, because when it gets as cold as it's gonna get over the weekend and has been for the last several days, let your faucets drip. Drip, drip, drip. Not the outside faucet, like a lot of people make the mistake to do, but your inside spigots, turn them on, let the faucets drip. David, I'm right in the middle of a presentation right now. Goodbye. So, yeah, that's a good idea. Let your faucets drip,
Okay,
especially the ones in the basement. And I'll be back in a few with an update for the Community Engagement Committee.
good, thank you.
Got good news there too. Good news all around.
Okay, that's what we like to hear.
Arthur, just a quick
Yeah,
comment,
yeah.
very quick, because I know we're gonna get really into the substantive business, but I know. I feel probably what I'm gonna say, everyone felt the last couple days, but just with the first snow. First of all, when the snow day for the kids and going down to the park, I mean, it was magical, right? And that it just really, you saw a lot of neighbors and folks who were in surrounding communities. It's really, I think, demonstrates the best of who we are and what we represent.
Well, that was, let me add that. I was gonna say something about that real quick, because I'm right there on the park. And I've got some pictures here. There
Okay,
had to be over 100 kids down there. I have never seen that many people, but we've been in the snow drought for 2 years. But it was like a Currier and Ives painting the other day down at the park. So why don't you join everybody down there tomorrow and see for
Okay.
yourself?
good idea.
And just one other thing, and I know Michael will probably bring it up, but I also, just as another, again, just a little dose of goodness that we all recognize is not only the park, but I remember I came back from New York. I had to visit a friend who's been fairly sick, and I came back, I think it was Monday night or Tuesday, I forget. I'm completely off my calendar. And there's a neighbor who's helping to shovel our walkway, and it was a little embarrassing. So I took the pay forward the next day and got theirs and others. But I just put that out there as, again, I think another really great thing about our community is when there's snow, you see again, just that caringness, and it's not like you need a reminder or some message. People just get their shovel and do it. So again, just another quick thought there. And I know Michael's going to update us on the whole snow
Yeah.
shoveling.
And I want to add to what Jeff just said. I walked home yesterday from Friendship Heights up Western Avenue, came through some of the side streets in the village of Chevy Chase, and then into Martin's Addition. This is the only area that had its sidewalks shoveled on Brookville. Western, it was hit and miss. The side streets in the village of Chevy Chase were completely unshoveled. And only till getting here could you count on it. So good job. With that, moving forward, residents' comments, don't comment yet on things that are coming up in the agenda. We'll give you time to do that later. But any other comments anyone wishes to make? Michael, anyone hand up?
Paula and Larry Watson's hands are up.
Okay, go ahead. Larry.
I wanted to ask Keith a question. So can he speak where he is, or does he have to go up to the
There, he's
podium?
there. He's just jumped up.
On
He's there.
camera now. And I've got your undivided attention, Larry.
Okay. So tell me what your involvement is with these doggy bags, the poopy bags.
Well, I was filling the dispensers, a couple of them just this afternoon.
Yeah.
I've been doing the doggy dispensers now for about the last 4 or 5 years.
That's on
since,
your own money, your own dime.
No,
No. They supply the bags here in the office. And I take them and I put them in the dispensers all over the village. There's one on Shepherd Street, there's one on Summit Avenue, there's another one on your street, Larry, on Thornapple.
Yeah,
And there's another one, I said Shepherd Street. There's one there and there's one at the park.
okay. So if you need any help on that, I'll help you.
Well, thank
Okay,
you.
we got more volunteers. Good.
That's
Thank you.
great. Always good to have more volunteers.
Right. Michael,
Thank you,
anyone else?
Larry.
Paula, is your hand still up?
Paul, is that an old hand or a new hand?
That's an old hand.
Okay, any new hands?
Susan Collins.
Susan?
Susan.
Hi,
Cross.
is it,
Hi,
So is-
Susan.
hi, thanks. So is it correct that if we have something to say about the election regulations, we should wait until that part of the
Right.
agenda? Okay, thank
Yes.
you.
Okay,
Doug and Hiromi.
okay, Doug.
Hi, thanks very much. Just wanted to ask real quick if there were any updates on the planter box at 3419. As last I understood that there was going to be a county inspection of it, and I'm curious as to whether there's any additional information on that.
Yes, this is Michael. The county reported back to us that they think those are built to their standard now. And it was a pretty short email, but that's all they said.
But they did have somebody physically come out and look at them?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Just one quick point, and again, we can take it off, to the side, because I know this is a very, especially for Doug and Hiromi and others, but I think the issue that had been brought up was, is it connected at the foundation? And then does that indeed conform to their standards? And so maybe we could, I know they sent a polite note saying, but it would be great to perhaps politely also push and say, did you check this? And yeah, does that make sense, Doug and Hiromi? Not to belabor it, but I think it's an important point.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, that's one issue. The other is that the record clearly states that the county's presumption is that they would be predominantly subterranean. And so if the county is explicitly now altering that, that was the basis of the county saying that they could be in the setback. And so since they are not in any way predominantly subterranean, they're in fact completely above ground. If the county has changed that determination, it would be helpful to get that in writing from the county for the village for the future.
Are you aware, Michael, are you aware of anything on that? No,
I'm
you're not
aware
aware
of
of anything.
We are addressing that at the village level for going
Right,
forward.
we have, in tonight's agenda, we will be considering the final dispensation of an amendment to require these to be no more than a foot above ground level. Okay, any other hands up?
Larry Watson.
Larry, is that a new one or an old one?
Yeah, no, that's a new one.
Okay,
I was actually just trying to clean my screen off with it.
okay.
Michael, I'm sorry I don't know this, but can anyone view the county inspection reports online?
I'm not sure about the detailed reports, but we can see activity on permits and inspections.
right.
Yes,
Yeah.
we can see the status at least. Yes.
Oh, yeah. So
That-
I'm wondering
that's
if there's any way we
that's a-
can request, seeing that actual inspection report.
Okay.
That's a county question. I
We
guess,
don't know.
So there's
Okay,
no way for you to ask for that?
No,
Yeah, I can ask. Yeah, it's a county
Oh,
question. Yep.
Thanks.
we can send it in our email to them.
okay, that's it, right?
That looks like it.
Okay, moving on, the minutes for the December 14th meeting. I have reviewed by mail, hope everyone else has reviewed it. Do we have a motion to approve those minutes?
I will make a motion to approve.
Okay, I will second that. If everyone Who agrees? Aye, okay. Is,
Andrew, isn't
I
it?
saw him raise.
is
raise his hand.
Andrew there? Okay. Okay, committee reports. We have one committee member right here in the room. Yeah, are you gonna do the election?
I only have one little small part. Is Marty online?
Okay, okay.
She just joined, yes.
Okay, that's okay. I didn't know if that's why you were here. Okay, go ahead.
Keith Allen, community engagement. And I think that everybody is gonna be interested in this because we've got some really good things lined up here. First of all, we will be having the brunch at the La Ferme. We've got that set for Sunday, March the 3rd, from 1 to 4 p.m. And we are preparing for over 200 people to attend that event.
Okay,
Not all at the same time, but over that period from 1 to 4.
And we confirmed the dates today.
And Michael and I were both at the La Ferme and we talked to the people there and they've given us the green light for that date and time. The next event that will take place will be on May 7th, the celebration on the sidewalk. Prior to or during the election process, which will be, of course, the same day and the same time. And then after that, we've got the July 4th celebration. We've got that set for Sunday, June 30. Because we've always done that. We've had the event on the Sunday prior to the 4th of July, except when it's fallen on Sunday. And then the other event that everybody looks forward to is
The movie nights.
the movie nights. Exactly. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We've got those set for August the 4th, September 1st. Both of those are on a Sunday. Labor Day falls early this year, falls on the 2nd, which is a Monday. So all we have to do is get the vendors lined up on that and decide what movies we want to show. And then we've got the Halloween parade and party, which everybody looks forward to. The kids especially, but the adults too. And we've got that to take place on Sunday, October 27th. And then last but not least is an event that we had talked about to have last month in December, but we never did get that off the ground, but we're going to do that definitely this coming December, even though that's almost a year away, and that's the Luminary Winter Walk. So we didn't decide on a date, an exact date for that, did we, Michael? But it would probably be sometime like in the first week of December.
Either the 1st or the 8th of December.
Yeah, okay.
good. We have a whole year's of activities in front of
We
us.
do. And I know that everybody's going to be very excited about
Good,
participating and coming to our events.
good.
So,
Thank you.
My time is up. I thank you for yours.
Good question for
Yes,
Keith
sir.
Allen. Yes, sir, John Sherrill, Chestnut. Is there a menu posted for the firm meeting?
Not yet, but there will be.
Okay, there will be eventually. And,
Yes.
We'll have that forthcoming.
Okay,
good
Jeff,
thing.
you had something to say?
Yeah, just one quick comment, and maybe it's, I forget if it's traditionally done by another committee, but the volunteer event. I know that last year it was delayed until this year. And, you know, maybe it's one of those things we do when the new volunteers are on so that we could have a mix and mingle, but I just want to put that out there. I think that's an important event to make sure we have.
We plan that and do that for our volunteers on all the different committees, so we can discuss that
Okay.
administratively.
Okay,
Awesome.
is Naomi here to talk about the anti-Semitism?
Yes. Hello, everybody
Hello, Naomi.
from St. Petersburg, Florida. So, so 2 nights ago, we held a webinar for our village and neighboring villages. 155 people registered, 39 of whom were VMA residents for 25% of the total. The rest came from the town of Chevy Chase, Chevy Chase Village, Potomac, North Chevy Chase, Kensington, Friendship Heights, Rockville, Rollingwood, Section 5 and 3, Gaithersburg, Somerset, and as far away as Florida, North Carolina, and New York State and Maine, parentheses, friends and relatives. And of those 155 registrants, we had 101 screens, which is 65% of the people who showed up, which is pretty high, they say, for industry standards. But more than likely, there were 120, at least 120 people looking, attending, because there were more than one person in a family participating. So that's about 67% participation, which is pretty good. We've done a post webinar evaluation, but we haven't gotten the results yet. But the few comments that I've received so far were very positive. So I think it's a successful event and a public service for the village.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a great presentation that you had. So congratulations on the whole operation. I particularly wanted to commend you on your getting out the vote, your ability to round up viewers from all over the area went very well. And it took a lot of energy to do that. So congratulations on the whole thing.
Yeah.
Bravo. Yep. Bravo. Good. Who else do we have? Any other committees?
Jean on stormwater.
Who's there? Elections, well, I want to hold the elections till last, because then we're going to take up the election ordinance or regulation. So anyone else? Michael?
Jean, would you like to speak for stormwater?
Stormwater has not had any operations in the last month.
That is correct. I can't add anything to that other than what you just said.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, elections. Let me say that we will be taking up the election regulation as the next item on the agenda. But Marty, why don't you say what you have to say right now, and then we'll get to that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Arthur. And I'm turning this presentation tonight over to my wonderful committee, led by my co-chair and vice chair, Paul Weller, because I'm running a fever of 102 and I'm down with the flu. But this committee has been wonderful and just a joy to work with. And I know Paul's going to say thank you too, but I would like to say thank you to Arthur for the attention to the regulations and to Katie for being our wonderful liaison. You've been just such a help at every step. I'd also like to thank Ron Bolt, who gave us, at the committee's request twice, 2 different sets of review comments on the drafts. And just note that we held 8 public meetings and it feels like a zillion drafts and markups. And I'm going to turn it over to Paul because this is a wonderful committee and they're going to take it from here. And if I fade out, it's because I'm running a fever.
Because you're fading. Okay, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Marty, and thank you, the Village of Martin Seditions Council and Councilor Ron Bolt for all your help during the year for the Elections Committee. It's been a pleasure to serve on it. Our job, our goal, I think our long-term objective is to put together a document that will live on, and we can use it year after year with minor revisions to it. And that's what we started working on last fall with the document that we used last year. We found 5 different pieces within the Village of Martin's Additions jurisdiction pertaining to elections. We molded those together into a document and sent that document 30 days ago today to the council for their going over and acceptance or changes and so forth. So the document that we have now takes a lot of pieces, puts them together, and we hope we can use this now with minor revisions in the future. I think that makes a little more stable arrangement than what we may have had in the past. So with that, I'll ask John Sherrill to if he has anything to add, or we've already had a nice presentation from our sick Marty chair. So John, do you have anything that you wanted to add to this?
I do, Paul, thank you. And thank the village committee for allowing me to speak tonight. As the village committee here knows, that we have done a tremendous amount of work on consolidation of the past regulations and so forth. There are some things that we have some concerns about, especially from the 1/4 24 regulations that we submitted to the council here.
Let me interrupt just for a quick explanation of this. Last month, the committee submitted their plan that was accepted as a draft regulation. After that, members of the council, especially me and our counsel, Ron Bolt, went over it and made edits and changes. So we have 2 versions here, the one submitted by the committee and the revised edited version. So with that discussion or description in mind, we can talk about what you then proceed, well, John.
I'm not sure. I'm sure that committee members probably have a copy of the regulation that was submitted. Correct. Okay. One of the things that we are concerned about in this statement of purpose pretty well spells out in the 23 regulations what the purpose of the 23 regulations were. And we attempted to say it was approved. Our recommendation of election committee said this should be approved, the 23 election rule, and that was our recommendation. However, obviously, your council, your members have said no, you would like to delete some of the language and only implement what we call the charter and code. We are a little concerned about that, but however, further, I guess, involvement with Ron Bolt indicated that the regulations to implement the election provisions, I'm reading this word for word, the purpose of these regulations to implement the election provision of the village charter and code in order to provide a free and fair election in the Village of Martin's Addition to ensure that allow qualified voters able to freely exercise the vote. However, this is language that I think is acceptable to the council from Ron Bolt. Am I not correct on that?
My memory on this is fuzzy. I don't know.
We would like to have the election committee. I'm sorry. We'd like to have the VMA committee look at this closely and see if we can't reach a compromise.
So you are suggesting that we adopt the item number 1 purpose in its entirety.
Exactly. Right. And I think that is should be a challenge for your committee to adopt that, or certainly look at it and at least come up with provisions or language that we all can accept.
Okay.
That certainly is one. The second item, but here again, obviously you're not going to answer us tonight, but we would like for you to bring it up in future committee meetings and see what can be adopted and so forth. Okay. Any further questions on that at the moment? Okay,
Okay.
there's another item, and it deals with the mail vote contractor. Okay, as we understand it now, we have made recommendations that the election committee be involved in handling the contractor and so forth. However, your committee has indicated that, you want to keep it as is, and basically the staff will carry out the functions and requirements that we present to the committee. The election committee will present requirements and so forth. Y'all will act on that. We'd like to have some further discussions on that. If you have any questions concerning that, but basically, I'm sure that we would like for some resolution before
Okay.
before our contractor gets involved. And so I may ask this question if I can. Have we selected a contractor yet? Has it been approved and so forth?
No.
No.
I have some things to add to that. We had bids that went from $5,000 to $50,000 for a contractor. So we've made a selection based partly on cost, also on recommendations, of course, from others. The other thing, it seems to me that we have somewhat of a conflict of interest here. If we have the council actually making the final decisions on the selections document and procedure. And it seems to me that the committee, whatever we propose to you, needs to be looked at very carefully. In the fact that we have put a lot of effort into it, in this case, 8 different public meetings over a long period of time. So keep that in mind. And as I look at it from a past council of Martin's Additions and so forth. Okay.
Thanks for your comment. I'd like to just add that we put a lot of work into it, and I'm sure you'll realize that. And also, we think that you have a lot of work to do to resolve some of these issues. And hopefully you'll take these up, and perhaps we can meet in between someplace. Any other questions at this point? You go ahead.
Well, I want to defer perhaps to others. I just had a simple question, or maybe it's simple, I don't know. First of all, again, I just want to commend the committee has done really magnificent work. And I also, everyone who's been involved, members of the council, Ron, put a lot of energy. Quick question, you created this really nifty chart here, and you mentioned a couple things from the chart.
Correct.
But there's a longer list here. So I just want to understand the expectations of the committee and tonight. Did you see because you only mentioned a few, but was the expectation that there'd be a walkthrough of this? I just wasn't, I didn't quite understand.
The ones that I addressed are of importance to the committee along with these others. However, I think to try to go through that would just take a lot of time and a lot of explanation. We would like for your committee to look at them, certainly come up with recommendations and, see, like I say, see if we can meet in between and see if there's any adjustment and so forth. Go ahead.
Okay, thank. I was going to ask, Ron, are you there?
Yes.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Could you first discuss the first item that John raised, that the first paragraph of the regulation, the purpose, the one line, the committee's version and the edited version that we jointly produced. Can you say whether the committee's, what's your view of the committee's number 1 paragraph purpose?
Yeah, that purpose statement is in the current rules. It's benign, but I'll tell you why I recommended simplifying it. These are regulations that implement the law. Regulations do not independently set policy or independently set intents and purposes. So I thought it would be useful to keep it simple. And there's an underlining reason for that. My task in reviewing the proposal and the current rules side by side was to look for things that had changed. Because as I understood, and I believe as the council members unanimously stated at the last meeting, the council members were hopeful that we were just going to be reviewing changes in dates, not going through substantive changes. And me having been your counsel for many years and having witnessed the unfortunate annual debate and division over elections, it appeared pretty clear to me that some of these proposals are meant to settle some ongoing disputes. And those ways of settling disputes do represent changes to the current rules. So I wanted to highlight those. And one of the fundamental disputes that has existed in the village for maybe 10 years, what should the role of staff be, the role of council be? And there's a conflict between what the committee wants and what the charter currently provides. There is no conflict of interest if the council approves the regulations. The charter provides that's the council's responsibility. In a small government like this, the village council exercises all powers, legislative, executive, and quasi-judicial. So in exercising its legislative powers, the election rules are passed. Now, the charter could be changed. The charter could be changed to delegate that task to the election committee, but that's not what the current charter provides. And so embedded in some of these edits are a shift of roles and responsibilities from the council and the manager to the committee. And there's other statements in there that say the committee may instruct the contractor to do this or that to make sure there's a fair and a free election, etc. And I'm paraphrasing. So it was that sort of focus that I had in mind in simplifying the purpose statement.
Okay, good, thank you.
Well, yes, I understand. Thanks, Ron, for your comments. And here again, I understand what you're commenting on. We felt that it's important at least to get clarification and perhaps some resolution on it.
Right.
And I mean, it's up to PMA committee, you guys, to either yay or nay, or come up with some compromise. At this time, unless you had some questions, I certainly thank the committee for their time and hopefully we can.
Okay, well, thank you. We'll have more resident comment, but before
I'm sure.
before we move on to that, Ron, I wanted you to address explicitly also the point on their comparison that you just alluded to it, that the election committee directly supervises the mail vote contractor, whereas our edited draft kind of deletes that. What could you comment on that particular point?
Sure. So, I mean, that's been an issue that's resulted in angst in the past as well. And, some assertions that the manager wasn't acting properly. None of the accusations were based in fact, I don't think, but the point here is just taking the division aside, the manager is tasked with implementing the contract, the budget, and there might be some things in these rules, as I pointed out in some of my comments, that would go beyond the scope of the contract. Michael would make sure that the contract is implemented and that the contractor's not being asked to do anything that's going to result in additional charges. One example there is the provision of early ballots. That's something we've not done before, so I noted we should make sure that's within the scope of the contract before we make that mandatory in the regulations. Michael also makes sure we comply with Open Meetings Act, Public Information Act. So in my experience, it is common for the manager to have some administrative role in a support capacity to the committee, but not totally divorced from the process.
Good, thank you. We'll now go to resident comments. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Oh,
Okay.
and Arthur, Arthur,
yeah.
you and Jeff both asked me to also address one other issue, and I could do that quickly, and that's with respect to certification of the voter roll.
Oh, right, yeah,
My use of the word supplementary. So I
right,
mean, there's a long answer here, but I'll try to give you a short answer.
okay,
State law provides that there is a statewide voter registration list, colloquially referred to as the county voter roll in these regulations. State law provides that this state list is meant to be a universal list for the entire state. And state law provides that Martin's Additions is supposed to meet with the county to come up with a plan for universal registration, to get our residents registered on the statewide voter list. Because state law actually provides that if a voter is on the statewide list, they are deemed registered to vote in Martin's Additions. We cannot modify that state list. State law does say we can have a supplementary list. So that's why I'm using the term supplementary, so that we're actually exercising that authority right from state law.
so, Ron,
Now,
this raises
the
a
regulations
question.
do say that there's one list going from Martin's Additions to the vendor, and that's the supplementary list. So ultimately, this is a non-issue. You know, the village is going to take the county list and decide who's qualified on that list, and then come up with a supplementary list to give to the vendor, instead of giving the vendor the entire statewide voter list, which we all
So-
know is
So
egregiously
you're saying
inaccurate.
that the supplementary list includes an edited version of the state roll?
Well, the supplementary list is the village's list.
Okay,
Yeah,
so, okay,
I mean, it's just semantics, really.
okay, got it.
But I do
okay.
think it's important to use that term so that, at least
To be
it looks like
consistent.
we're acting in accordance with that state procedure.
Okay, that explains that. Thank you.
But I mean, you can raise that there are errors with the county list. I
Oh,
mean,
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely. The county list is horrible. And
Yeah.
it takes
yeah,
4 years to remove a name from the
right.
county list.
And for example, my dad, it took me 5 years after he passed away to get him off of a ballot.
He's
I
still
can't-
voting, right?
Yes, maybe. So, yeah, I mean, the county list is.
Okay, so
far from
then,
perfect.
so there's no nefarious issue here. It is following state law and the auxiliary list is the list.
Right.
Okay,
right.
let's turn
Oh,
now
and,
to
and, I'm sorry, one other
ahead.
comment. You asked me to comment on curing.
Mm.
So the current rules provide that there's going to be a meaningful and reasonable and meaningful effort to cure, but it happens all on the day of the count. So the current rules provided that there's going to be a preliminary canvassing, and with the help of the vendor, the committee, and in front of witnesses, non-conforming ballots would be identified. There'd be an adjournment. The committee would try and reach out to the non-conforming ballot issuers. And then there's reconvening later in the day, all on May 24th. Prior to that, in 2022, we did talk about how the curing process was not laid out in great detail, and this was another hotly debated issue, as all council members will remember. In my opinion, the current proposal of allowing a week of curing after the count is new.
Okay.
May I just add one
Please.
thing? Just that I served as liaison that was mentioned. I sat in on all 8 meetings. And I really want to commend the election committee before we delve into it, dive into it tonight. I think we did turn a corner this year. This has been an exceptional committee. There's been no infighting. It's been very peaceful, hardworking process. I just want to commend all 5 members. I've enjoyed my time with their meetings. And there was a mention made to our, let's say, terse past, terse exchanges in the past. So let's also move forward too. Let's not dwell on that in the past, and let's focus on the plan at hand, and let's move forward. And I hope that this will be a nice dialogue and exchange, not necessarily arguments, and council has the right to ask questions, and have different opinions. So I just wanted to open it up, but I wanted to thank everyone first. Thank you, John, for presenting. Thank you, Paul and Marty. Please get your blanket on or drink lots of fluids. You're a real trooper. So I hope
Thank
you're
you.
feeling
I
better.
want to second what Katie said.
Yeah.
So let's now turn to the members of the community.
Arthur, I just want to make, and again,
Okay.
this is kind of rhetorical and it could be addressed later. So I just want to make sure, and again, Ron, thanks for the input. Greatly appreciate it. So the curing piece, I just want to, again, this is kind of illustrative of perhaps other things where it sounds like there's no objection to whatever was in the 23 plan. And just want to make sure that if there was.
That's not totally.
No, the one that was already approved.
Right, last year.
Yeah, so. what
And
I'm-
second look, some things don't look good.
Oh, so we're saying that even if it was in.
If it were exactly last year's plan, we would take a new look at it.
Okay, so let me just be very clear. So if there was language, because I'm hearing from Ron, if there was language in the 23 plan that had been approved, it sounds like the committee had looked at it and made further recommendations.
Yeah.
But as a default, maybe I'm looking at it to either or, but as a default, if for whatever reason there, is an intolerance for further changes, my assumption at the moment is at a minimum, it falls back to the baseline of 23 that was approved.
It's there. I mean, the plan is there. The essence is there. There was some reshuffling and there have been suggestions, additions, enhancements, whatever you want to look at it as, but it's there. The essence is there.
Okay, residents' comments.
Thanks.
I know we have a number. Susan, you had your hand up earlier.
I would rather listen, I'm happy to hear a couple of others first. Thanks.
Okay, anyone else?
Naomi?
Naomi? Deep in the heart of Florida?
Oh, I think she's on mute.
You're muted.
You're on mute.
Please explain to me, Arthur, what changes you envision in the curing process that are different from the 2023 approved version?
In the edited version, we do away with curing altogether.
Please explain why.
Yeah, one reason is that in the last 4 elections, we've had almost 1,400 ballots, 1,395. None have required curing. So that
But that makes, okay, so what?
So it is a process and look in search of a problem, and it adds delays to the coming up with results. And I don't think it's a necessary thing to do. I will suggest, in fact, I will make a suggestion right now that I was going to make later. A number of very thought out recommendations were made as policy in the original committee document. I would recommend that you submit these as ideas for further council discussion and explicit adoption in code or charter to consider these policy changes rather than having them in the procedural document that is the election committee procedure.
Hold on, you changed the subject. These were 2023 approved.
Right.
Curing process. Why are you changing that? We're not asking for a different policy. This was approved, and yes, it may not have had to be used in the past, but it's good to have it there just in case. Why has that been changed? Don't you want to make as many voters participate in our process? So if there are any changes that need to be made belatedly, don't you want to allow for that?
Not necessarily. Depends on the process, depends on how long it takes, depends on the effort involved. That's my view. Anyone else want to?
But you're changing policy from 2023.
That's
And
right.
you're-
I did- in my, that's right. In my comment to Jeff, I said if we were going over the 2023 policy from the beginning, there would have been changes to be made. Yeah, just because it was there last year doesn't automatically mean we would have adopted every point this year.
Okay, so another comments I want to make
Yeah.
is that you're making it really hard for the committee to go on with its well thought out process by putting all kinds of barriers and saying, well, we have to discuss this separately. Arthur, this is not a smoothly run democratic process. We are recommending to you procedures, processes, you can call them policies, whatever you want. But this is what we're recommending as a committee to you. And you're putting all kinds of barriers for us to proceed further. So I don't see this as a fully democratic process, Arthur. I see this as it putting all kinds of, putting us at a disadvantage for recommendations that I'm hoping the council would approve without a whole lot of discussion. We're talking about a wide open process for maximizing voters' participation. Why are you eliminating the curing process? Why are you making all kinds of other humps for people to overcome?
The only, I will just repeat what I've said before, that these are policy issues that are coming up in a procedural document, and these policies should be fully discussed.
One
adjudicated,
example,
voted
please.
on.
An example, please. An example. What's a policy?
The curing,
That's not a policy. That is a process.
do I have any other?
Well, you call it whatever you want. That's
Okay.
a process.
I'll give well, this might come up later, but the dealing with referenda is a totally new issue that has never been discussed and should be in the charter if it is going to be dealt with.
We have done away with referendums. We're doing it with regulations.
Okay.
So you're just creating all kinds of problems that we don't need to have. You're just picky. You're just being picky. You, sorry.
Okay. Any other comments? Did you want to respond? No. Okay.
Ron later.
Okay, we'll come back. We'll return to this. Who else? And
Larry Wasson was next.
Larry?
I'm kind of puzzled about your answer to Naomi's question, Arthur. If I understood what you said that you were eliminating the curing process for expediency. And that sounds about as callous and insulting to the voters as you could possibly be. So I'm sure you didn't really mean that.
Maybe I did.
Yeah, well, maybe you did, but why would you be that way? That's not very democratic, is it?
Because
anyway, I'm really not asking you to interrupt me right now.
Okay.
The other thing is that it doesn't make sense what you're saying. If in fact it's for expediency and we haven't recently had the need to cure, it's not delaying anything. So that's a false premise. It's put in there to ensure that as many voters who make the effort, which is so valued and hard to get people to do. And should they make some minor mistake, we simply want to cure that vote and recognize the value of it. That's why it's in there. And there's no valid reason you're offering to deny it or try to get rid of it or anything else. It should be as it is.
Okay.
The other thing that you are talking about is this phrase supplementary. I think Ron was not accurate on the things that he said. I talked to Boris Brajkovic, who is the head of the County Board of Elections. And he made it very clear that they rely on us as a source of hearing their voter roll and making it accurate. So and also in other discussions, I find that should we create a supplemental roll and deny someone who's on the county roll the right to vote in the village, we're wrong. We can't do that. So the idea that we only need to, the ethics committee, the elections committee's job is to just deal with the supplemental voter roll is not true.
Well, I want to come back to that later. Ron, be ready to return to that question of the supplemental and exactly what that is. Who else? We have somebody else?
Andrew, and I think that's Naomi. Peter Kahn hasn't.
Okay.
Go ahead, Peter.
Peter?
Oh, he's on mute.
Thank you. I just wanted to take issue with something I thought I understood Ron to say, which is that the curing process is a new policy, and that the way it has been done before is that all the curing has to be done before the counting of votes. And, you know, I'm looking at the 2023 final election plan that was approved by the council, and that clearly approves exactly the same policy that is embodied in the new proposed plan of the election committee. In other words, this is something, and you know, my belief is that I'm confident that that same policy was in election plans going back a couple of years before the 2023 plan as well. And so it's not something new, it's not a change, it's something that the council has approved several times in the past. And you know, so it's not out of the blue, it's not something radical. It has worked well in the past. In the last year, there were no non-conforming ballots, and in prior years I think there were one or two. And what the vote curing process did was allow those votes to be counted, you know, after it was determined that those votes were in fact valid, even though that they had not signed the affidavit on the back of the envelope. And you know, I you know, to say that we're going to get rid of vote curing, I think really is a policy that unnecessarily punishes, and I think it punishes two groups in particular. I have an 19-year-old son. Last year, he voted in Martin's Additions for the first time. We made sure that he signed his ballot, but I think, you know, for new voters, people who are not familiar with this process, it may seem counterintuitive, and you know, the vote curing process makes sure that new voters can be included in the process. And I think people who are new to Martin's Additions, people who've moved in to the village, may be surprised by this as well. So I think it's in the nature of a courtesy to people who may be unfamiliar with the process, to simply allow their votes to be cured. And you know, I just don't see the problem. It's worked in the past. It hasn't been a big burden. It's something that we're familiar with. It's been in several election plans that have been approved by the council. I don't see the purpose of getting rid of it. And you know, to me, it seems you know, exclusionary. I just don't understand why we would want to do that. It's not a big burden. Takes a little bit of time, and so you know, I would like to see it included.
Here, one question. I don't recall there having been a actual case of curing where it wasn't adjudicated on the spot. There were issues with readability or coffee spilled on it, and they could be dealt with on the spot, and not the kind of process that you're describing. I may be wrong, but I don't think we've had any actual curing in the past.
Well, maybe others' memories are better than mine, but it seems to me that in prior years, there have been one or two.
Well, I went through all the election committee reports since we've had mail-in ballots, and it was never mentioned as a issue in any of them. Okay.
Hi, this
Okay,
is
Marty.
Marty. Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks. Forgive me. It was a problem in 2020, I believe. We had 4 or 5 people who, it was a first mail vote election. So of course, you know, people weren't familiar with the process, as Peter just said. And there were 4 or 5 ballots that were excluded, that were not counted that year because people had not properly filled out the affidavit on the back.
Okay.
So those were voters who were disqualified, whose votes were valid. So I'm going to fade away again, but I just want to mention
Okay,
that was a
thank
problem,
you.
and this was to correct it.
Okay,
Check that.
okay. What's that?
I'll check it.
Okay. Okay, who's next on the,
No, Andrew's been.
who else has their hands up?
Lynn Willie was, but it looks like it dropped off. Andrew.
Andrew?
I'll let Naomi go first since this is resident comments, but I just wanted to comment as well on this.
Okay.
Oh, she's on
You're muted,
mute.
Naomi.
Just to correct the record, my husband and I switched envelopes. So my ballot went into his and vice versa. And that was a problem that was corrected midstream. I really want to make sure that we have a process by which we allow residents these minor mistakes and not invalidate their ballots.
Yeah, I think that's already there, and that's already included in the both the regulation and in the process.
So just, yeah.
Yeah. Who else? Andrew, do you want to go?
Oh, why don't I let Susan go? I'd rather have all resident comments and then I'll just make a quick comment as well. Susan.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to say a few things. I agreed with what Paul Weller said about the need and importance of creating a document that can live on and just have minimal changes year to year, so we don't have to kind of re-go over the same discussions we've had for several years. And and agree with what John Sharrow said about the need to have the committee, just because of conflict of interest, deal with the contractor, and that it is in the charter that the committee manages the elections. So in terms of conflict of interest, I think it makes sense that the committee would deal with the contractor, because it sounds like, yeah. And let's see, I was going to say that my understanding is that in the past year, the decision about whether, well, I'm not going to get into the specifics. In a democracy, I just feel like we want to hear from people through voting. We care about each person weighing in. And I think it's important that we continue to care about that and to make that manifest in the election regulations. And to the extent that curing ballots allows a ballot that might, a vote that would otherwise not be counted to be counted, I just don't see why you would go on the side of disenfranchising. So I just feel like the basic principle here is to enfranchise people. I feel like the election committee has done a lot of work, 8 meetings. They've come up with this election regulations that have abided by these principles. And so to suddenly, you know, again, at the last, which we've dealt with for a few years in a row, come up with a set of regulations that seems to undercut some of the public discussion we've already had about this. It makes me wonder, why are we doing this? But at least to get back to the principle again, in Montgomery County, it is required that ballots are cured, that you cure ballots. The county regulations are derived directly from the state regulations. The state regulations, and I've spoken with our Board of Elections people in the state, in the county, the state regulations require that ballots be cured. It is not should, it is shall. Okay, so when we in Martin's Additions take our, I should think we might take our cues from the county, from the state. We are being completely consistent with what's been done before. That has been in our election regulations or policy in the last few years. So in fact, it's a great departure to suddenly, after 8 meetings of this election committee that has worked so hard, that has done something that is in fact consistent with not only last year, but last few years, even if it's not used a lot, don't just throw out the, the curing ballot process, because you can, who knows, maybe this year will be like 2020 or whenever it was when there were 3 or 4 ballots, and could make a big difference. So I do hope that we'll kind of focus on enfranchising people and kind of respecting and honoring the work that our own residents have done on coming up with an election plan that enfranchises us. We should I just want to really ensure that ballots are counted. I do not want to hide behind the let's hurry it up so much rationale that we do not have time to cure ballots. It may have been said in the past that you have to make a decision about curing ballots on the day of the vote, but that was a decision about whether to cure the ballot. It didn't say that you must immediately, within 20 minutes, within 3 hours, etc., finish the process. I think that the good thing about the election plan or regulations this year is that they really got into the details there and said, hey, on the day of the election, it can be determined by the election vendor holding up the ballot envelope. Hey, we're not sure about these 2 or 3, etc. The committee weighs in, they determine, okay, we're going to try to cure those. You have 5 days for the voter, which is a reasonable amount of time, to cure those ballots. The committee has 6 days, which is so the amount of time that it takes the voters to look at that, 6 days to go ahead and tell the vendor, yes, we did cure this number of ballots, and this is, so please open those ballots and we can count those votes. I don't think that's too much. I don't think that's waiting too long, because last year I don't think the results were even kind of conveyed until a couple of weeks after the day of the voting. So it's not like it has to be instantaneous, and using that really excuse or rationale that we can't do it. Let's try to find ways to enfranchise, and it's consistent with what the county's doing, with the state's doing, with what we've done before. And I'm not going to I don't go with the cherry picking of, well, maybe that's a policy or that's a regulation, whatever. And then other times we go, oh, we're going to do what was done this year. I mean, let's go with the basic principle. Let's enfranchise people. Let's do everything we can to count the ballots of people who bother to vote, our own fellow residents, out of basic respect. This is not a biased thing. This is a democracy thing. And I really hope that we'll count those ballots and put back in those curing ballot provisions. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jen Bergeron has her hand up. Jen Bergeron, and she's one of the committee members.
Yeah. Jen, are you there?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Katie, and thanks, Arthur. I'm actually on the election committee, but so will speak partly in that capacity and maybe all, but partly I think as a member of Martin's Additions. or a resident. And I'll be real quick. You know, I agreed to serve on I volunteered to serve on the elections committee out of conviction that it's a public good to be part of the process. And I'll be honest, I've never been to a council meeting until tonight. I've come to realize that there are things and politics and disputes that have happened, most of which I have no clue about. And I've picked up small things and I've learned a lot tonight, but I just wanted to offer that as a resident, as somebody who decided to commit some time to try to do the work of the committee to organize elections. And I think somebody who cares about kind of the basic democratic process, what's animated me is the idea that we should make sure that every resident who is qualified can vote. I don't think if there's an administrative reason why somebody's vote would otherwise not be counted, we should limit ourselves. And so that's why I would tend to agree with like Susan's principles here in terms of why getting rid of a process, even if we don't use it very often or at all, but ultimately is designed to make sure that we count all the votes we can, we should be against it. You know, and I think lastly, I really appreciated Ron Bolt's comments and explanations because it really helped me understand a little bit about the law and kind of, you know, where we are on the edges of laws, policies, and procedures. And the only other thing I would say as I, you know, on the issue of independence of the committee and who runs what, you know, I took Ron's point that we can't divorce the village administrator from the contractor. And I think all I would ask is, and I think all any of us should expect, is transparency. Not that Michael can't be involved, but it's, you know, transparency of communication with the contractor to the, you know, to you all, to us. And, you know, I mean, all of us, at least I'll speak for myself here. I want to be ultimately reasonable. I want to have the most efficient election possible. But I also want to be as inclusive as possible and as accurate as possible, you know, in service of what I think all of us ultimately believe in. So I'll just end it here, but
Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Well spoken. Look, I see a hand up. Is Larry?
Larry and Andrew hasn't talked yet, but.
Okay. Larry?
Yeah. I wanted to thank Susan for her comments in particular about the curing process that is required by state and county. I'd like, Arthur, I'd like you to sort of, a couple of months ago, I made a comment that the weakness of our village government is the turnover of and as a result of the turnover of the council members, we get inexperienced, unknowledgeable people trying to do their best, but making the same mistakes over and over again. And one of the reasons this committee worked so hard on these elections was to clarify for future situations what should be done. Since we're exempt from state and county laws on elections, placing the curing requirements and the other requirements that we asked for in there is essential for future election committee people to understand what they should be thinking about and how they should be trying to deliver the election.
Good, thank you. Andrew?
Thanks. And I might still be able to come in person, but I'm waiting for my wife to come home. So I didn't think this would happen, and it's like deja vu all over again. I thought the 2 years that I was fortunate enough to be chair, and we went through this process year after year, that with last year's election plan, we found, and with many of the folks that have spoken out just now, a plan with which we could move forward and just switch dates and make minor adjustments. That seemed like the agreement when we went line by line through this plan. So I was a little surprised to see so many changes again. Having said that, and I'm sorry I haven't engaged this week much with the council, but with the snow days and kids home and work, I was drinking from a fire hose. On the curing, I feel pretty strongly that the very generic, very broad language that we had inserted last year, and I think Ron made some reference to the prompt, reasonable, and meaningful attempt to contact the voter. I don't see a problem with that at all. And the argument that it's never been a problem before, so why insert this language, doesn't make any sense to me. It is language that safeguards everyone's right to a vote. And if we never have to use it, wonderful. But if there's a chance that we might, and there's an envelope with a signature missing, and we as a council and decide it's fair to contact that resident, not in a 5-day period. I think we talked about this last year as well. We don't need 5 or 6 days to do this. This is a 24-hour turnaround. It's a small village. But to give every resident that feeling, that sense of security, that if they screwed up in filling out that form, the envelope, not the voting, but the envelope with the signatures and the address, that their vote will still be counted. So I think it's no skin off our nose as a council to keep similar language to what was in the 2023 plan in there and move forward. I think there's no reason. This is not our stumbling block on this election plan. This is, I think, a no-brainer to keep in some of that language that we had last year. That's all.
Okay, keep that in mind. We'll be calling on you in a short while. Any other comments from the community? Are we?
Peter Kahn has his.
Peter, are you there again?
Let me push all the buttons. I would appreciate it if the council members would explain to the community why they have decided to eliminate ballot curing. What is the goal that is being sought, and why is eliminating ballot curing the means to achieve that? Could you explain this to us?
I'll give you my rationale, and I think Larry or somebody already alluded to it. One is that for expediency, and the other is that we haven't had any cases for it in the past, as far as I could check. I went back over all of the election committee reports of the last 5 years or so. So that's my rationale. I don't know if anyone else wants to add to that. So. Okay.
Arthur, is it possible that there could be a case in the future?
Sure.
So do we wish to
the rate so far has been well under 0.1%. But you would argue, and others have, that every vote should count regardless of percentages, and it's an argument. Anyone else?
If the curing process is condensed and is reasonable and prompt and perhaps contained within a 24-hour period, I don't see an issue with having it. I don't see a point in having a long drawn out affair just to heighten the drama and extend the whole election counting process. Okay. So.
Okay, thank you.
I'm happy to comment briefly, because I know this is one of a number, and maybe we can get to the administrative procedural of how we go through perhaps this list, but I just want to put on the table. And again, it's a fine line, because I respect every single person who has put their time and energy into this, from the committee to Arthur and to Ron and to everyone else. But I guess I just want to, so whatever I share, I feel I'm going to get hit from either side. But I just want to put out, and I say this with great deference and respect to our chair, is I think this is the first time, at least for my understanding, because we had shared a little bit to our committee that the idea is, we want to just change dates and, so there's a little bit of a kerfluffle in terms of at least some looking at anything that was beyond changing dates might have been an issue. But now, if we use that litmus test on the council, meaning that now we're taking something out that was in the 2023 plan, I mean, it seems a little bit unfair, or just, how can we say to our committee to say that, sorry, we only wanted date changes, so we're going to revert back on things, and then we tell them that we took something out that was in the 23 plan because, we looked at it more in depth and we considered that maybe it's not necessary. Because then the committee, I think, has very good arguments to say, well, they looked at the 23 plan, they had 8 meetings, and they felt that, yeah, we could make some tweaks and make it better. So I just feel that we have to also have a little bit of humility to recognize that if we're going to shift the goalposts on them, then, we have to also use the litmus of how much are we changing the goalposts for us. And the final thing is administratively, I think that we've seen this over the last couple of years. So maybe, Katie, who's liaison, or Arthur, or maybe there's a really great list here. I mean, could we just go through almost like line item by line item and just take votes? Because at the end of the day, we haven't voted on it. Right. And so again, I think this is the first I'm hearing around the curing is, that we are not reverting back to what was already settled matter, right, but we're actually now undoing something that was approved. So I think it may be reasonable then to kind of just go through and say up, down, and move on. If that's
no, we're not going to do that. I'll tell you what we will do. Have we heard everybody now?
There's
Naomi, Peter
Three
Kahn,
hands.
and Susan Kahn have all raised their hands since.
Okay, we have more hands up.
Hi,
Naomi.
shall I talk?
Susan, go ahead.
So I just wanted to say about the amount of time. I think one of the reasons it was important to fill in that you could have 5 days afterwards is at the county level and at the state level, you have about 2 weeks. That's my recollection. So, and last year, I don't think that there were results that were publicized at least until a couple of weeks after that voting day. So I think when sometimes, for example, as an analogy, people can say we have early voting in our county. There are 6 locations, and then the next council that comes along or in a city could say, well, we're going to have early voting, but we're only going to have 1 location. And the next county, the next one could say, we're going to have early voting in 1 location, but we're going to just limit the hours. It's only going to be 2 hours a day. So there is such a thing as a commitment to the principle of, say, early voting. We're going to have enough locations and we're going to have enough hours. Here, if we really are committed to the principle of enfranchising and making sure the votes count, and if by chance somebody messes up on their ballot, or one partner exchanges it with another, the envelope or whatever it is, you need the signature, or you didn't have whatever, I don't know what the issue would be. You just really want to make sure you have enough time to contact the person and make sure that they get their stuff in. And when you say, oh, it's reasonable 24 hours, I don't think 24 hours is I think that's way too rushed. What is the purpose of rushing it? If the principle is enfranchise the voter, make sure each vote counts, make sure the ballot counts and is counted. Why do plenty of people don't read their email every day, don't even answer you might not get the message right away. You might tell it to the person on Monday. They might hear about it late Monday, get back to you. Oh, it's too late to call them back on Tuesday. And then you haven't had a chance to cure your ballot, to have it counted. So I think by saying you have about 5 days, I don't see the rush. Putting it into a framework where this has to be rushed is essentially disenfranchising. If you're going to be committed to the principle, commit to it. If the county, the state does a couple of weeks, 5 days is not way too much to consider. I think that that's reasonable. And I think that's partly why it was done, is because there's an awareness that some people are not necessarily committed to the principle of following through with curing the ballot and enfranchising and going to the trouble of contacting the people if it's necessary. And so we went ahead and said you could have up to 5 days. It doesn't have to be 24 hours. It doesn't have to be the same day. But on the same day is when you need to do the public process of determining whether or not you are going to at least try to cure that ballot envelope by looking at it in public, and people see that the process is fair. People are weighing in. So that's what I think is meant. The importance of doing that in public. There should be, I think 5 days is reasonable afterwards. I don't think it's excessive. And so that's just, put meat behind, put like kind of teeth into whatever you're trying to really achieve in terms of the principle, or you kind of undercut the principle if you do it too quickly. But I do appreciate all the effort that you all are doing, and acknowledge what you said, Arthur, that yes, it doesn't seem like there have been many ballots that have been cured. That's wonderful. But just in case there are in the future that need to be, I think it's fantastic to put it in your election.
Good, thank you. Thank you, Susan. Naomi, are you there?
I have a question for you, Arthur. And first for Susan. Susan, what is it about this ballot curing that you think will create drama?
Let me pause on that one. For dramatic
please.
effect.
I would like an answer. I would like an answer, because it's really an incendiary comment. And let me get to Arthur.
Oh my
Arthur.
God.
Yeah, well, please explain then.
Please explain.
I can offer some comments that might help
Well, I'm
guide the
sorry.
council to a
Ron,
final decision here.
Thank
I
you.
would like to ask Arthur,
So
what is it about expediency? What is it about expediency that is so important in this case?
I can address that too.
Okay,
let me,
please, Ron.
Ron. Okay, Ron, you go, then I'll go.
Sure. So one comment that Susan made that I really appreciated is that with the state law and curing, results aren't being announced. State law was amended in 2023, I believe it was, to allow a 10-day curing period. What struck me as potentially problematic with the proposal for Martin's Additions is that there was going to be a preliminary vote count in public, and then 7 days to cure ballots after the preliminary vote count. So although unlikely, let's say we have a close election and there's one ballot to be cured. That person's identity is going to be known, and that person's going to decide the election, and everybody in the village is going to know that person decided the election and who they voted for. I do think if you want to have a curing provision, you should have a pre-canvassing provision where you take a look at the ballots before the count. And that's how it was done the last 2 years. So if I'm reading this correctly, in 2022, the first curing provision was added to the election rules. There was a pre-meeting on Zoom with the vendor on May 23rd. That gave the opportunity for non-conforming ballots to be identified. And then there was the opportunity for curing, and then the count took place on May 25. Last year, that was shortened. The canvassing was done in the morning and the count was done at night. So to the extent that's helpful for the council, again, with the proposal now, it would be preliminary vote count, then 7 days of curing afterwards, which struck me as odd.
No, Ron,
Canvassing beforehand, I think, would be
right. So, Ron, the plan this year is that ballots are accepted essentially until the counting begins, the process of counting begins. So they wanted to allow as much time as possible for the mail to come in and not be ballots not be rejected because they didn't arrive by a certain time earlier in the day. So to get back to your initial question, Naomi, I have to tell you that my view comes from the old-fashioned ballot before we did mail-in, where we voted. The election committee went next door in an empty room. They did their counting. We had the vote that night. So it's this idea of not quite expediency is the word, but drama. This is an election. We know the results right then. So that is my issue. It's an emotional issue of let's do the count, do the ballot. We have the results. Everyone knows the winners. So nothing much deeper than that.
I guess, Arthur, the only thing, and I see there's other hands up, but maybe we could address it now or later, because I asked the question, are we going to go through line item by line, and you said no. So I'm just curious.
Here is what the plan is.
Yeah.
We will hear everybody's comments. I will suggest that we introduce the edited plan and then ask for council members' suggestions for amendments to that. You already have suggested an amendment. There may be others. So that is the plan, that we have amendments in mind to amend the edited version. But do we have any more hands up from residents?
Susan and Larry again.
Larry.
Okay, so thank you. Ron said that recently is it the county that have changed their curing time, and it's now 10 days. So I find that's very educational. Obviously there would be let's talk about drama. If there's drama in this silly little council election, people have got to they need to fulfill more in their life. So I can't envision that. And if that's an issue, then the person who has that drama shouldn't be on the council, because that's ridiculous. The next point is that if 10 days is what the county has learned is necessary to cure, then certainly 5 days on our part. Again, the people aren't taking office tomorrow. There's plenty of time to do this. And it's simple. It's not burdensome to anyone on the council at all. It's simply the vendor and the committee, and that's what they've got. That's what they're supposed to do. So all the arguments I'm hearing are just really sort of not valid.
Okay, good. And Susan, once more.
One thing that was said is that I think if I understood Ron, the comment that there might be drama because the identity of the voter that everyone was waiting to hear from would be known. I don't quite understand that. I think typically the vendor would raise an envelope that has a number on it, that would be the main way you would know. I don't think anyone with basic professional confidentiality, commitments, who's on this committee would let anyone know who that number related to. If it did say the name of the person, I would hope the vendor would have the sufficient discretion to know not to turn that around and show everyone in Zoom, it's this voter who didn't do something or other. So I don't think that would be known. That is absolutely confidential. There is, in fact, that's exactly why we have it, you know, just by the number. Anyway, so I don't think that that's going to be as much of an issue as there might be an idea that it could be. Expediency. One of the reasons I think that you really need to have a provision around curing ballots is that if there is ever a really close election and you would actually have to do another election to determine something, except for 1 or 2 votes that you can't even cure the ballots and to count them, then you basically have no process in place to decide something. In other words, if it really made a difference, this 3 or 4 vote ballots, that whatever, you need to have some sort of process written in place, even if you haven't used it for 10 years. On year 11, if you're so close in a particular election, you need to have it in place so that you can have a provision to count those ballots. Because if you say, oh, we have no provision to count those whatsoever, and that would be changing our process now, then you've really got a problem. So I think doing these regulations in a way that kind of predicts that there could be an issue later, let's go ahead and write a process just in case, so that we then don't have drama. And things are more expedient to finish the election instead of having it hold on and do a whole nother election because we didn't have something in place. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Any more resident comments? Okay, it looks like we are at the end of resident comments, and the council is now ready to take up the voting regulation for 2024.
I think I saw Peter with at least 1 or 2 hands waving, Peter Khan.
Peter Khan?
Yep, it's me again. Sorry.
Okay.
Again, about Ron's concern about pressure being brought to bear on somebody. The only thing that's being sought is verification of whether or not this is his envelope, whether he filled out the ballot in that envelope. And, you know, that does not require him to suddenly weigh, you know, the reality that, oh my God, my decision is going to determine the outcome of the election. He's already made his decision, and all that we're looking at is whether or not the ballot in that envelope is his or not. And he fills out an affidavit. There is, I don't think the concern that Ron has raised is a legitimate concern.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we are now ready to move forward. Do we have a motion to introduce the amended election regulation that we introduced last month? Anyone choose to move? To not to introduce, but to what's the word I'm looking for? We've already introduced.
It's already been introduced.
It's already been.
Whether there's any amendments to that.
Right, right. Do we have any motions to amend? Yeah.
So I'm not quite understanding.
Okay, well, we have
is a completely amended version.
Right.
That you're introducing.
No, it was introduced. It is a revised, edited version.
So the motion to introduce the revised
edited version. Yes.
Okay. From which we then will have a discussion about
on whether we are
amendments.
or whether we will have further amendments on the revised edited version.
So, like I said, this is where I say I'm gonna get hit from either side, and I say this with great respect and deference, is I just want to be delicate and careful with the idea. And again, I know how much effort I have said, I'm saying here publicly, I think the magnificent effort that, Arthur has also put in reviewing and providing edits, and so has Ron, but I just want to be careful just procedurally in that, we have a committee who introduced a plan in December. And I want to be real careful about what it signals, not only to this committee or a future committee in future years, that we as a council had taken a vote to accept the introduction. And then the idea that we're not going through that plan in line item, but yet what we're doing is we're saying we're submitting a counter plan.
Not a counter, an edited version.
So what's happening here
Yeah.
versus the last 2 years is that the last 2 years, we took the plan that was introduced by
Yes.
the council that was received by the committee. We did line by line.
Yeah.
And today we're introducing an already edited.
And, but modified from the last 2023 version
Right, yeah.
as well. So it isn't just like taking the 2023 and trying to add a few
It's
changes.
it was taking the plan that we introduced last month from the election committee
Right.
that has been edited.
With the
modified.
assistance of Ron.
And
Okay.
somewhat myself.
So I guess that's where I'm a little confused, because if we're reintroducing.
We're not reintroducing.
We're introducing
We
an
are-
edited plan that has further edits.
Yeah.
That even go further and take back some things from 2023. So are now we starting another clock?
No.
That we need to
No.
then.
No.
Well, has
because-
all of council reviewed
Okay.
both drafts? Has everyone, has
And
everyone
I'd just
looked at
like
the
to say, I
comparison?
think that was a really cogent point you made
Mhm.
about recognizing the contribution that committees have made to a various amendment or ordinance or regulation, and deferring to them to some extent and not trying to go back and revise it midstream. I think that's a really good practice and very deferential to committees.
Yeah, no, so again.
Yeah,
with
very,
respect to that
very
point,
much
mean,
so. I
again,
think
wanna
you know
be
what I mean.
Really careful with the idea of, a committee worked 8 meetings, submitted us a plan, and I just want to be real, because yeah, I mean, it kind of what it does is it would de-incentivize me to be on a committee and work really hard on making a plan, and then
We're not throwing
But,
out the
yeah,
plan.
and at the same time, I think some of us were a little surprised at what ended up in that version, so.
And so we essentially are working on that plan. And there have been number of amendments and edits to it that were completed 2 weeks ago. That has been, the committee has had a chance to review it
Yes,
carefully.
there's been a
The
conversation.
council has had a chance to review it thoroughly.
Yeah.
So now what I am seeking is, to that edited plan, do we have any suggested amendments based on what we have heard today or, at other times? So.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I have a suggested amendment on the curing
Yeah.
part of the equation.
okay.
So in reviewing the 2023 plan and in reviewing the submitted 2024 plan by the committee, I'm comfortable with the language that the committee submitted
For curing,
for curing.
okay.
And I would recommend amending the amended version and including the line that begins with the contractor shall set aside
Good.
and
Okay.
ends with initial vote counting session.
Good.
And that would include the 5 business days. I've agreed now, having listened to Susan and Peter and others, with that timeline.
Good.
Again, with the hope that we will not even have to use it, but this just
Right.
as an
Okay, thank
emergency.
you. You have a second on that.
Second.
Second, okay. Let us vote on the suggested amendment.
Yeah.
Aye, aye. Thank you.
Unanimous.
Residents, you made good comments, good arguments, and they were accepted. Thank you. Do we have any other suggested amendments by council members? I see no suggestions.
Well,
You do have one?
with regard to the supplemental list of voters, that's just using the definition as Ron stated
Right,
it,
so
so
that's
that's
there.
already there.
That's there.
Um,
Requires no
as
change.
far as
Okay.
others.
So I see no other suggestions for amending Jeff, you were about to say.
I wasn't sure if anyone else, I just had a couple of questions. They may have already been resolved previously, but I just want to make sure. So this issue of the supplemental list, I heard, and I didn't seem to be an issue, but I did want to just point out that I think when we talked about conducting an audit, we said we conducted an audit on the voter roll, and we didn't have this use of supplemental. So again, I just want to make sure administratively, I mean, in essence, we want to validate a VMA voter roll.
Right.
And so it arose by another Rose name, you know, but I just want to put that out there. So that was just a point.
Okay, thank you.
And then the other one was, and it may have been corrected, but the replacement ballots, I wasn't sure about the cutoff and did.
Yeah, there was confusion on the dates. I made changes to, it can conform with the election committee's recommendations. Election day is defined in the calendar as, I think, May 7th. It's the traditional day, the celebration on the sidewalk where there's a box. It's not the day that the votes are counted.
Right.
So people get in their minds that maybe this election day is counting day. That's not the case. So that got confusing.
And the other piece of it, I don't think it has a real big, and I also want to commend the chair saying, you know, let's create this list of things so that we know that, you know, perhaps not today, but, you know, for future consideration, but things like the election forum. I mean, that seems like a nothing burger, but I guess the idea, if you're making it a regulation, you're saying, let's not get too prescriptive, but I didn't see, like, for example, why that would be controversial to have an election forum.
It was the form. There was nothing wrong with having, in fact, it's in the plan. It's the shall. There was the word shall in there, that there shall be. So it's
prescriptive.
It's prescriptive.
As you said.
What we want to do is allow future committees to
mandatory
to change to
not a
it.
good thing.
That's the only thing about that.
And another, like, again, real innocuous, and I apologize, I promise but the things like anonymous form questions, was there any particular reason why that was,
Well, that was actually the one I brought up last time. Yeah, that was, it is not a good practice, if it is used as a weapon. And that has been used in that way at past forums, as your wife can tell you. So it's very tempting perhaps for, people who are running elections to
and the only thing,
veer off that path. So it's just better to keep it above board.
and I know that there's this idea of a wish list, and so perhaps the committee, you know, in their closure report towards the end of the year, they'll provide a short list of things, you know, to consider, but I'll just put out there. I mean,
right.
I thought the idea of procedures for recounts and referendums, I mean, I thought they were great. I didn't have a real, you know, but I wanted to just put out there that I wasn't opposed to it. It seemed like a good idea.
Well, I'll return to that. So we have no further suggestions for amendments. I will call for a vote to approve the election procedures, the edited ones as amended, as approved, the amendment approved. So what?
That are regular.
One quick question.
A regulation, a regulation.
And Ron?
Yeah,
Ron,
but
you have anything before we vote?
Yeah, just a quick one. So right now, audio is posted on the website, and there's a proposal for video to be posted as well. And so I don't know if you wanted to address that. In the past, you know, some folks have said, you know, we're comfortable with audio, but not video.
Actually, video, they did video of the last forum.
Okay.
But I don't know. Was the word video? I didn't notice that.
It was posted.
Yeah, yeah.
That's good.
Okay, let us proceed to a vote. All in favor of the amended regulation? Aye.
As modified.
So we
I
need a
will-
motion in a second.
Well,
Or did you move? And I'll-
I move to, what am I moving to? To
Adopt.
moving to
Election
adopt
regulations.
the revised election committee regulation with the amendment approved tonight. I so move.
And I'll second.
All in favor? All in favor?
Yeah.
We have a unanimous vote in favor. And with that, I want to extend an invitation, more than an invitation, to the election committee to take those ideas that you put forward, like covering a referendum and so on, for future discussion by council for adoption into either the code of ordinance or the charter. Many of these were good ideas. There were policy ideas and they did not belong in a regulation. And I think they need to be fully reviewed and discussed in council forum for future considerations. Future councils. Okay, moving on. We have an ordinance that had been introduced earlier on restriction bioretention planter boxes.
Oh, Arthur,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to do this too, just
Go ahead.
bit of housekeeping. So the election regulations were on the agenda for possible adoption tonight, having been
Yeah.
introduced already.
Yes.
If we reintroduce,
Well, we're
then there's a possibility that we have to wait another 30
Well,
days,
what-
which would take us
when-
to March.
well, when we introduced the amended version or
Okay. Yeah, so just a motion to amend the proposal before the council with the anticipated public hearing being at the February meeting. Is that what everybody wants to do? Have a hearing at the February meeting?
no.
The
How
opposite.
can we say it so that it's adopted tonight?
All we did is make an amendment to the introduced plan, and then this was the public hearing, and we just.
Oh, my
And
my
then voted
apologies.
to
I
adopt it.
misunderstood. It's a motion to adopt. Okay, I thought
Yeah,
it was,
motion to adopt,
To
yeah.
adopt. Yeah.
okay, gotcha.
Okay.
Nice try, Ron.
Okay, the bioretention planter box was introduced last month. It is up for final adoption and consideration tonight. That,
I don't mean to cut, but
Go ahead.
Peter, I just want to be respectful. Peter, was there a burning issue or question that you had?
Well, I'm not sure how legitimate this is, but let me just raise it. Last year, when the 2023 plan was under consideration, the committee draft was introduced, and then the council went through the draft line by line, made changes, and voted on each of the proposed changes. And then voted on the final draft. This year, I'm not sure what the process was by which those edits were introduced into the committee plan. It seems to me that they were done by some of the council members basically acting just because they felt like they wanted to. And those edits were never actually approved one by one by the rest of the council. And so when you finally came to asking the council to vote on the edited amended plan, many of the changes, in fact, most of the changes, had never been voted on by the rest of the council. And so they were asked to vote on essentially a pig in a poke. They had no choice but to accept the changes that had been introduced without any formal procedure by one or two of the council members. And so I raise a question as to the validity of the vote.
Peter, they were adopted en bloc. I think that is a phrase, but with the opportunity for people to amend. So if there were issues or if there were points in there that were undesirable, there was opportunity to voice that.
I think, Peter, every chair does it differently. And last year was as contentious as they come. And so I decided last year, based on some of the shuttle diplomacy and the back and forth with the community, that the best way forward and to bring peace is to do this line by line during the council meeting. I think the process that occurred this time around, and I wasn't part of it because I wasn't the liaison, but what I understood because it was shared with me is that there had been already a back and forth between committee chair and committee members and the council chair and council members to have these conversations in the lead up. And as Arthur said, by adopting these en bloc, I mean, it's the same, it's just a different process.
Yeah.
True, but I mean, I'm in favor of going through it line by line. It doesn't bother me.
No.
But that's my opinion,
Yeah.
you know,
don't
and I think it's beneficial to the people at home who haven't been a part of this process and up till now. So, I mean, there is something to be said for that. So I'm just mentioning that.
Okay, we are now ready to consider the adoption of an ordinance to amend the Code of Ordinances to add building requirements applicable to above-grade stormwater collection and drainage devices. Ordinance number 2023-11-1 that was introduced in December. Do we, yeah,
Arthur, before you make a motion, could I just ask, is it okay if I ask a couple of questions? So I guess just in terms of one's a question, maybe one's a statement. One question is, we know that there are other jurisdictions that perhaps are also addressing this is a confounding issue. And I just wanted to hear perhaps either from Ron or Michael or yourself, just was there any sort of research or understanding of what others are doing, or are we leading the way? I just wanted to get a sense of that. That's one. Two, and again, I say this with all respect to our developer friends who are out there who are continuing to reinvent and do everything to reinvigorate communities. But, the reality is that we've learned, I think, from this experience, folks know how to perhaps find ways to do things where there may be some areas that we don't cover. So again, I just want to put out there that I appreciate that we have a legislative policy solution, but I still feel from an administrative standpoint that we should, like, at least minimum new constructions, that we're made aware of it, because maybe there are some other things that this isn't addressing, but we want to truly avoid another situation. Because like I say, it's sort of like whack-a-mole. Okay, we got this, but what's next?
You never know what's
Make
next.
sure that we have some sort of fail-safe administratively. Does that make sense? Those are the two things.
Well, I think it's always whack-a-mole. You never know what the future is going to have. And, but Ron, you can mention when you were looking into the bioretention box, what you found in how they seem to have been originally conceived of as a really urban measure to deal with water, not something that was going to be used in communities like this. So Ron, do you want to comment on that at all?
Yes, sure. So we were somewhat surprised that the county took the position that because the bioretention planter boxes were environmental site design practices approved in the Maryland Design Manual for Stormwater Management, that they were completely exempt from setbacks. Looking at the county code, there is a county code provision that provides rain barrels, rain harvesting and collection devices are allowed to project into a setback 3 feet. So it was surprising to me that the county did not apply that provision. And looking at the Maryland Design Manual, these bioretention planter boxes are described as being purposeful for ultra-urban settings. So you can imagine a concrete jungle where there's no grass for water to naturally infiltrate. You can create grass with a planter box so that the water has somewhere to go instead of hitting concrete. I'm not an expert, not a water drainage engineer, but based on that, it seems to me that these were not really meant for residential settings where, because of sloping topography, the wall could be 5 feet tall or taller. And so, on the other hand, stormwater drainage is a serious issue in the county. And bioretention devices are growing in popularity, as I understand it. The village probably doesn't want to prohibit them altogether. So this ordinance proposes somewhat of a compromise. It applies the county 3-foot exemption from setbacks, but says, because these things are really meant for ultra urban, they can only be 12 inches or lower in order to qualify for that 3-foot exemption. If because of sloping topography, these things are going to be taller than a foot, then they present themselves as part of the house and should be subject to the setbacks applicable to the rest of the house. You are at the forefront. The town of Somerset is considering a similar ordinance. I'm not aware of any other jurisdiction doing so. I did pose questions to the county, asking if the county was ever going to clarify the issue and why didn't they apply the 3-foot setback exemption, and would there be any instance because of sloping topography that they might change their mind? And I got no response. And that's the first time in 15 years I've gotten no response. The county's usually been great with working through issues like this with us. But here, I think it's so novel and so difficult that, we have to proceed with what we can now, because you might get an application tomorrow for one. Doesn't mean you can't amend the code again. Arthur uses the phrase whack-a-mole. I like to say scar tissue. The law is constantly evolving based on lessons learned. We cannot predict everything that's going to come down the pipe. Hence the reason for this ordinance. And I'm not a builder. Builders are going to constantly look for loopholes and ways to exploit the code. And once we find those loopholes, we have to close them.
And can I just, one quick thing, I'm in support of this. I just hope that the 1 foot versus that tower they put up there will address the stormwater issue on these properties that are being developed, because it might look better and not be as invasive, but if it doesn't address the actual issue, that's going to be a problem too.
And to that point, Andrew, you still have the opportunity for a variance. So if someone were to say, mine can't be 12 inches, it's got to be 3 feet, can I have a variance? Then you can have a hearing on that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But there is another issue that the water committee is finding, is that builders are required to retain a certain amount of water on their property through all sorts of devices, dry wells and so on. If they cannot do it or choose not to, they can ask for a waiver from the county, and waivers seem to be granted 100% of the time.
Like handing out candy.
So, so Somerset, their water committee formed a suggestion that their own building code denies all waivers. You cannot ask for a waiver in Somerset. That has not gone forward, but right now it is a recommendation from their committee. But this is something that we're going to be thinking and talking about in the future. So with that said,
it's good to know that the VMA is a leader.
We're a
and
leader
not
in
a
this,
follower.
yes.
I mean, I like that, but I mean, it does make me wonder, like, is it a Band-Aid for a bullet hole?
Well,
I mean, and it says public hearing and possible adoption. There are residents who were impacted by this, and they're the inspiration by this. Do we get to hear from them at all in this process, or?
We have in the past, not tonight.
Well, I just wondered if
Tonight's the public hearing.
Yeah.
And Doug just raised it.
And there he is. Okay, good. That's who I
Good,
want
so
to
we
hear
do
from.
have comment.
Yeah, I was getting very concerned there that there would not be an opportunity for public comment at this public hearing, at this public meeting. So thank you for taking up the ordinance. I have a couple of questions, and I was thank you, Ron, for that explanation, which was all new and quite useful. I have a question about first off, a couple of the whereas clauses on the second page of the draft. The first whereas clause on the top of the second page of the draft, which is page 40 in the meeting packet, says, whereas officials from the Montgomery County Department of Permitting Services have indicated that certain stormwater drainage devices, including but not limited to microbiome retention planter boxes, are deemed exempt from county building regulations, including setbacks, even in situations where, due to sloping topography, such devices may be significantly above grade. Now, in the public meeting about the situation at 3419, the record clearly stated, the county clearly stated in its communications that its presumption was that these would be predominantly below grade. This is now saying, or in this, the village is now saying that the county said the opposite. Could you illuminate for us just that a bit, and in what way did officials indicate that, and can you share that indication?
Sure. So yeah, I see where the confusion could lie. We could certainly tighten this up a bit. It wasn't an express statement that we don't care how tall they are, nothing like that. It was with respect to the project adjacent to you specifically, where county officials viewed the actual walls. And despite viewing the actual walls, or actual planter boxes, determined that they were not subject to setbacks. Does that help?
No, actually it doesn't, because if you look at the record, the email correspondence that you received from the county that you shared in the packet for that public meeting a couple of months ago, the county said explicitly that their understanding was that they were predominantly, I'm quoting here, predominantly subterranean. Now, and that goes to the question that I asked earlier in this meeting. If the county is now saying differently, given the fact that the village relied on the county's statements and the county's determination regarding setbacks, then I think the village has an obligation to clarify that. Isn't that the case?
No, I don't think so. As I understand it, as I recall, county officials viewed the as-built structures and then had a conference following a site visit and confirmed that the as-built walls were not going to be subject to county setbacks.
But is that on
And
the
you're
record?
saying that conclusion is inconsistent with what the county put in writing, but I don't have a response to that.
I'm just saying it's inconsistent with what was provided to us by you and the council in the record, as the record the day before the meeting on the project 3419. So if there is a record of this subsequent to that, substantiates this first whereas clause, it would be good to see it.
No, that's what I'm saying, that recital is basically my conclusion of what I understood the position the county was taking.
Okay, I might suggest that therefore, and I don't doubt that. I don't question you. And I'm not questioning you. I'm not trying to challenge you. I'm just saying that given that it is not clear, then it would seem that the county is fully aware that, I wonder if we have a situation where the left hand is not talking to the right there, where the person who went on record and was willing to go on record stating that they're exempt, that the county considered them exempt from setbacks because they were predominantly subterranean, that may not be, that rationale may not be the same, may not be present in the determination that was communicated perhaps by others to you in leading to this formulation here.
From what I'm hearing, the right hand may not know what the right hand is saying. There seems to be some confusion or unwillingness to come up with final definitions here at the county. As Ron said, he never heard back from them. So there just may be extant confusion.
Could we just amend this
Yeah.
to remove that very last line of that first paragraph on
That's
page
what I would
40? Just saying even in situations where due to sloping photography, devices may be significantly above grade, just remove significantly above grade and call it good there. Doesn't that solve your problem, Doug?
It's not, it's not my problem. I'm saying here that we are saying that in this clause that the county indicated something.
Right.
When the village provided a record saying that the county indicated the opposite. And so that says to me, it's not a question of what we put in writing here, especially given that the village has been relying for decisions of some consequence and cost to the village and to its residents on these statements that it would behoove the village to ask the county and insist that the county clarify what we now understand to be they're saying very explicitly saying two very contradictory things about the same project.
Wouldn't be surprised.
Understood, but that's beside the point. It doesn't mean, whether, the surprise, whether or not we're surprised is beside the point, because obviously this has implications going forward.
Okay. Okay, Ron, does this have implications going forward?
We could just strike that entire paragraph. It's not necessary.
Okay.
Or we could say, with respect to a project in the village, the Montgomery County Department of Services did not impose setbacks on a microbial retention planter box.
Let's just take out that whole whereas.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
I actually would be in favor of keeping it in because.
Oh, you want to keep it in?
Well,
okay.
No, yeah. I mean, I'm pointing out a contradiction here that I don't doubt that is something that Ron, that you are documenting, going on record for. I want to highlight there that it highlights an issue that the village needs to clarify. I do have a question also on the whereas clause, the third whereas clause on that page, where it says, whereas County Code Section 59417 B5 B2 provides that a permanent rainwater collection or harvesting system may project a maximum of 3 feet into any side street, side or rear setback. Again, if that is true, again, we have another situation where that is manifestly not the case at 3419. So is that also is that in fact the village's understanding of the county code?
Well, the code speaks for itself, and I don't think we're here tonight to relitigate that permit, respectfully. I understand the frustration there. Where the recitals are pointing out, the county has a code provision that says this. It wasn't implemented with respect to the project next to you. So the village is adopting regulations to regulate it on a local level where the county did not.
Okay, thank you. Another question. Under the definitions, as I recall, in the material regarding these microbial retention planter boxes, the term that one of the terms that the county uses to describe them is facility. I believe they call them stormwater management facilities and other types of facilities. And so just wanted to flag that and ask the question, defer to you, Ron, if by excluding that word facility in here, we might be leaving open a loophole for something that they might simply call something other than some sort of planter box, harvesting, collection, infiltration device. I'm wondering if it makes sense to include the term facility. I don't know the answer to that question. It's a legal one, but I just wanted to flag that for you since the county does use that term in describing these things.
Yeah, I think that would be a good addition. So I've used 4 terms: projection, element, appurtenance and equipment. And the reason I do that is the county code used to refer to projections and appurtenances. Based on that, the Martin's Editions of Code did as well. The county code was amended in 2014 to change those two terms to elements and equipment. So I'm adopting those, but yeah, certainly wouldn't hurt to add facility as well. I don't believe this comes up in chapter 59, the zoning ordinance of the county code, but we can certainly add it for more clarity.
Yeah, there was one.
Go ahead, Doug.
Sorry. I was going to say there was a PDF that the county produced that also was included in the meeting packet for the earlier public meeting that described the county. I think it was a 3-page PDF, you might recall, and I don't have it in front of me. I apologize because I'd have the exact term. It was environmental something facility, stormwater management facility. It was in that document that and it specified some of the county's rules and restrictions on them. So that's the document I'm referring to.
The only other thing I was going to say, if we're going to look for synonyms, the one that stands out to me, not just facilities, Doug, maybe even structure as a word, but at the end of the day, even without it, we can still enforce and say by using facilities or projections or elements, we meant this, what you're built here just now are intending to build. But structure is another way, I think, to define, especially what we've seen here on Cummings. So.
Okay, so shall we move forward? Ron, introduce the word.
Actually, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. No, please go ahead, Arthur. I just want to make sure I did have 2 other questions that I wanted to ask. I didn't realize you were
just responding to this right now.
Yeah, got it.
Ron, should we introduce the word projections, elements, facilities, and equipment?
Appurtenances.
All right, projections, elements, introduce the word facilities and appurtenant. Appurtenances.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a good idea. I'm just hesitating because I can't tell you the impact on the rest of the code. It's kind of, I guess I would like to think about that.
Okay.
But I mean, this is up for adoption tonight.
Right.
But I mean, you could delay it a month.
We could. Is there any rush to get this done right now?
I have 2 houses that are coming online and are going to be applying for their permits in the next week.
Do you know whether they have
I don't.
boxes?
I'm sure curious. Yeah.
Okay. What do we think?
What is the worry, Ron, with facilities? How impactful would that?
We could always amend the code later to add that if we need.
Sure. So right now, the strategy is which is the same strategy whenever we're amending the code, is to stay within the existing framework. The code is currently closely modeled after the framework of the county code. The county code imposes setbacks on buildings and then allows exceptions for elements and equipment, previously known as projections and appurtenances. So I tend to prefer to stay in that framework because when interpretation questions come up, although not binding on us, how the county does things has been helpful. We can say we have borrowed this language from the county and the county does it this way. So we find that persuasive or not under certain circumstances.
Okay.
And by the way, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
And the village does not regulate things that are detached from houses. And I would just want to do a global search and, make sure that adding the word facility here doesn't create a conflict somewhere else. I doubt it would. It's probably going to be fine. In fact, we could add it tonight, and then if it turns out to be a problem later, I could take it out.
Let's do the reverse. Let's pass this one that we have tonight and see whether we may have an amendment later. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, my question is just if a developer shows up with a plan and it goes against this new ordinance, and facilities is not in here, we could still say the intent is that it is included.
Look
that-
at the legislative history.
I mean, so, but,
Arnie, is this
uh,
a public hearing though? Isn't, I'd like to.
yeah,
make a
yeah, yeah.
comment.
No, I was gonna just, actually, I'm not the chair, but I was gonna
Go
point
ahead.
to you, Larry. Go.
I think Doug is absolutely correct here. The county is now using the term facility. You're not inventing it. It's being used. And it should, personally, it should be in this piece that you're adopting today.
Well, Larry, it's used in the design criteria pamphlet, which is implementing the Maryland Design Manual. It's not actually used, to my knowledge, in the setback rules in the county code, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Like, I suggest we
I
move
still
forward
think-
with what we have, and if further research suggests that we should amend it, then we can amend it. So let's,
I'm absolutely in concurrence. I just,
Yeah.
quickly, I just want to make sure, a couple things. First, and maybe we already adjudicated this and we were making no change, but on that first whereas, I just wanted to see, are we ending it after including setbacks and striking that last
no,
part?
just leave the whole thing.
Only, and I just want, that's okay if you want to vote on, I just want to, I see Doug's point. It's almost like we're giving them a mulligan in terms of we're inferring something that isn't clarified, and we're inferring that the county is in fact allowing for these things that are significantly above grade, and maybe they're not. And so I'm saying we don't have to give them the benefit of the doubt, but anyway.
Okay, and oh, thank you, Jeff. You gave me time to find the email. So in the record item number 14 from that subject hearing, there's an email from Patricia Wolford to Doug Lohmeyer, our building permit administrator. Sorry for taking so long. After further considerations, we do not consider these in zoning as they are a requirement to stormwater management and are bioretention areas which will be planted. No setbacks or exemptions required. It's basically a planting box for stormwater purposes. So based on that email, I'm comfortable with how I've presented that indication from the county.
Okay.
But I'm biased because I wrote it. So if it's not clear, we could certainly amend it.
Okay, well, let us
Yeah.
then move to adopt, and then we will consider
Yeah.
any.
I
Go ahead.
actually, I had two more questions, as I indicated before.
Oh, okay.
If I might, thank you. And Ron, there was another email in the packet from the same person where they used the specific term predominantly subterranean. So in addition, I know the one you're referring to, and in addition to that, but that's just an aside for now, because I think leaving it as is would be fine with, as far as I'm concerned. But I had a question on in the last section, so section 7402 of the draft, the C, the setbacks 5. So on item Roman numeral 2 and Roman numeral 3, just to make sure I understand this, the insertion of a maximum of, those are the only changes there, and that's meant to clarify the restrictiveness of those provisions, correct?
That's correct. That phrase appears in Roman numeral I, and I was just trying to make all the provisions consistent.
Okay, and then on,
Because as you point out, if we say may project 5, air conditioner may project 5 feet, then someone could argue it has to project 5 feet.
right. And then on item 4, where it talks about the height, and it says in the second to last sentence, height is measured from the surface of the adjoining ground. So, and again, adjoining, is that to be understood in the same with the same meaning as abutting, or what does adjoining mean there?
Yes, adjoining means abutting. They're synonymous terms.
And I'm not trying to come back to the project next door to us again, but it's the one that with which we're all familiar, so I'll refer to it. So in that case, it would be adjoining ground would be the ground on our property next to this thing that's coming right up to the property line, correct?
Correct. So you
Yeah.
look at the ground on both sides of the wall and take the lower of the two. So
Okay.
you look at the ground inside the box and you look at the ground outside the box, and then you know, in your situation, you're using the ground outside the box, which is significantly lower than the planting material inside the box.
Well, one scenario, hypothetical scenario, I hope it will remain hypothetical, although I will note that the developer did indicate the intention to do this at the last meeting, and that is one way to make those planter boxes more subterranean is simply to grade the ground around the box so that it creates a very dramatic slope toward the adjoining property. It's my understanding that that is what the developer has stated and intends to do, which would divert the water flow onto abutting property.
That's a great point. So with respect to building height, we measure from the lower of the pre-construction grade or the post-construction grade so that dirt can't be flung up against the side in order to lower the height. But we could certainly clarify that. Height is measured from the surface of the adjoining ground at its pre-construction or post-construction elevation, whichever is lower.
Isn't that mentioned elsewhere in the code?
It is measured elsewhere with building height.
Right.
Yeah.
Building height, but yeah, so it should be added here too. Height is measured from the surface of the adjoining ground at its.
And I will note just the significance of this for the Stormwater Management Committee and for future issues. You know, when we had the rain the other night, there was a rapid river like we've never seen before from the adjoining property onto my property. We have a large backyard that with nothing on it, completely permeable. We have never had any water accumulation ever, because there's so much land to soak it up. The back third of our property was saturated. We had a 3-inch pond. The people behind us on Shepherd Street, not immediately behind the property, their drainage was completely overwhelmed. And the water couldn't get into their drainage, their inlet. The inlet was backflowing onto my property, and then the Shepherd Street neighbor abutting my property, who had 3 inches of water halfway up towards their house, completely submerging under their playground, which had never ever been underwater, under 3 inches of water. And it's possible that because the gutters haven't been installed next door, that some of that will be controlled. But the effect of controlling that and putting it into the planter box is designed to divert all of the water that comes off the building directly to the most vulnerable neighbor with the inlet that's already overflowed. So just putting that on your radar, how important it is to address this issue of grade changes and diversion of water flow onto
Ron,
abutting property.
do we want to add then a line then on how to measure grade here?
Yes, so on the bottom of page 3,
right,
we would add to the sentence, height is measured from the surface of the adjoining ground, add, comma, at the pre-construction or post-construction elevation, whichever is lower.
Okay.
And may I ask just one more question to the council? One thing we learned at the last public meeting on these planter boxes is that they have a lifespan. The question was put to the developer, what's the lifespan of these planter boxes? And the response was 10 years. So the question of who is responsible for maintaining them and what happens to them after the 10-year mark, whether a property owner could decide it's not worth it for me to maintain them, it's very expensive, I'll just rip it out or just leave it be, and with no longer functioning, that creates a stormwater management issue. Now, it's not clear that it has to be addressed in this ordinance, but it is certainly something that we have on record now at the village in public meetings that it is an issue. So I would hope the stormwater management task force takes that into account, because
Doug, that's true of dry wells and many of the other devices that are being used.
But there's a difference here, and the difference is that the presence of these devices is what is used to justify lot coverage of the house, right? And so that problem is permanent. A dry well, creates problems. So, but the only way a developer under the county code can go to a certain maximum lot coverage is by having one of these devices. The lot coverage of the house will stay as long as the house is there. Okay. The device that justifies it will only be there for 10 years, or may only be there for 10 years. Right. So it's a different problem, and it's one of urgency, that the solution now to that issue would be just to prohibit these things, and that's the only way to address it.
Yeah.
And
Doug, we're not discussing water management right now. Let's continue with this particular ordinance.
And can I just add one quick thing? And that's exactly, Doug, why I think I reluctantly voted for this to proceed, this planter box, because I was so worried about that raging river, the rapids you talked about. And the fact is, with this ordinance, by reducing this, will that in essence require developers to build smaller homes, or homes that don't have the same coverage of a lot, because their planter boxes cannot absorb all that is required? I mean, it's just like,
they'll ask for a waiver.
Yeah.
Well, and I could just add to that. So the county does require applicants to negotiate a stormwater management right of entry and maintenance agreement when these types of plans are approved by the county. And then the applicant is required to record in land records a stormwater management right of entry. So the requirement is presumably that the approved stormwater drainage devices are going to be maintained in perpetuity. And that agreement is recorded in land records. So a subsequent owner, to my understanding, can't rip out anything that is required by that.
Who enforces that?
That's the county enforcement. This is not something the village regulates.
Right.
It's the county.
Okay. Anything else on this particular draft?
I don't want to,
Go ahead.
but just at least some comments, and then for consideration, whether it's for this or the future. So I think Doug really raised, and also Andrew's comments really raised a couple things in my mind. First, part of this is about the size of the building, and that, so again, this is not my area of expertise, but in any way, shape, or form, by passing this, are we again then saying to the developers that if you do it in this way, we're still going to end up with these humongous or out of character structures? So I think that's a piece like the whack-a-mole. Okay, we're getting into but I just want to put it out there.
Well, we will be developing this over the next month, a proposal to look exactly at the size of the buildings.
Okay, so
directly, explicitly.
Awesome.
Good.
The other piece, and please remind me again, I'm not an expert in this, but are there any, and again, Doug, I want to thank you for your comments. Are there any parts of the county requirement that when these things are being put in and you're building new construction of these devices, that there has to be some sort of environmental study of the runoff.
Oh, yeah, there's
Okay.
the water drainage. There's a
So-
part of the county, your plan for the county.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one could argue, again, this is a side discussion, but hearing what Doug is describing to him and his neighbors, it would seem to me that perhaps whatever they had done in terms of their study, clearly it's not,
Well, Doug suggested it may be that they don't have all their drainage equipment
Okay.
in place right now.
So it's too.
But that rainstorm, we never have a problem. Our backyard was underwater in the storms.
Last two things, and again, this may be just part of an evolving, to amendments and things. So the lifespan piece,
That's an issue.
maybe it's something that is considered, do we put in something that talks about that these need to be designed for a certain period of time? If the developer is saying 10, well, for VMA, if we feel that's in the best interest of our residents, can we up that game? That's one.
Yeah.
And then the other piece is, if I remember, maybe someone, Andrew, you may recall, or others, or Doug, but if I remember correctly, there is a discussion about how this was designed for the type of flooding event, if I remember.
It's, what is the phrase? There is a.
Year but this was not designed for that major event. It was designed for something that was a minimum.
No, there's a county requirement that you design your water retention for a
10-year storm.
10-year storm.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I just share that
So-
again, it's part of the issue of lifespan is we are now seeing an occurrence of events that are well beyond the definition of a 10-year storm. We're seeing events that could be 50, 100. So again, it's just something to consider in terms of, do we up our game? Because the county may have minimum standards like a 10-year and yeah, so I just want to put.
Yeah, the water committee is, this is a major issue.
Thanks.
Okay, so are.
Can
we
I just
ready?
clarify? Sorry, I raised
Go
my
ahead.
hand again. Just to clarify one thing I did say. Yes, it's true that when the gutters are all in place and channeling the water into the planter box, it may change what we observed the other night, but it will change it in a way that takes all that water that falls on the house and directs it and discharges it directly
into that box,
into the most vulnerable Shepherd Street neighbor, because the outlet for that box is positioned directly opposite the most vulnerable Shepherd Street neighbor. The one, as you may remember from the meeting, they put up retention walls on the other Shepherd Street neighbors' property lines that will channel all the water towards the one neighbor. And then this planter box is designed to discharge all that water that previously was more distributed directly and concentrated and directly opposite the most vulnerable Shepherd Street neighbor. So it remains to be seen whether this planter box is going to improve or substantially worsen the water flow exposure of the most vulnerable Shepherd Street neighbor.
Okay.
And I put it out there, and again, it's not to prolong the conversation more, but it's important is, and Ron, whether you comment now or we take it offline for the future, is if there was some sort of environmental study that was conducted and that it was implied that this would do certain things in terms of the management of the water, but yet once all the interventions are fully in place, and it does not meet what the developer had said it would, then what is the recourse for remediation? I just wanted to put that out there, as we have to investigate, because
Right.
they can promise anything, but what if it doesn't meet?
What, as I understand the building code procedures, you have the standards, you meet the standards, nobody's going back there afterward to measure whether it really works. You meet the code, that's it. Okay, are we ready to vote on an amended ordinance here? Ordinance number 2023-11-1 as amended by Ron to include a definition of adjoining ground. Do we have a motion to, what do we have to do now? We move to introduce.
This is,
To adopt.
this is
Motion to adopt.
adoption. Yeah.
Right, motion to adopt. You have a
Motion to adopt.
adopt. Do we have a second? We have a vote? All in favor? Aye.
And
Okay.
just to clarify the amendments,
Yeah.
are we, the facility language, is that going in now or we're gonna think about that?
No,
Okay.
if we need it in the future, the amendment will be your addition of defining adjoining ground.
Gotcha,
Right.
okay, okay, thank you,
Pre-construction or post-construction height, or
Right.
whichever is lower.
right. Got it.
Okay,
And who seconded that?
okay, we are now ready for the next item on the agenda, which is discussion and possible introduction of amendment to the already introduced ordinance on ethics defined definition of official. What this is comes from a suggestion by Council Member Blander that the amendment that we already introduced a few months ago be amended to include an explicit protection of committee members who may be subject to an ethics committee hearing. And this will be included in the amendment to the ethics code. So you have it in front of you. Ron, do you want to have a short description of this? Let me just say, there was another suggestion that we were looking at that I put off because it was so clumsy. The term public official. A number of people object to it, saying, we're not public officials, we're just, just arranging parties. What do we as public officials? So I wanted to change, enough people raise this as an issue that I thought we could change it, get it out of the way. I thought the suggested changes were pretty clumsy and you have to do it in so many places throughout the code. But if anyone has a really good term that encompasses employees, elected council members, committee members that are defined by the charter and code, ad hoc temporary committees, ongoing committee members, if you can come up with a term.
It's elective, appointed staff.
Public servants.
People will say public servants is a good. I'm asking residents, come use your poetic imagination and come up with one collective term that we can use to include all these groups. It would be really helpful. So, Ron, do you want, excuse me, you want to discuss the changes made to the proposed changes to the ethics code?
Sure. So the code was previously, the ordinance was previously introduced to expand the definition of official to include committee members. And Councilmember Blander suggested that an accompanying amendment could be made to the indemnity provisions of the code, which currently provide that if an official is sued for something they've done in the course of their service, the village will provide legal counsel for the defense. Right now, that's limited to situations where there are criminal liability or money damages at stake. But this amendment would expand that to include when an ethics complaint has been submitted. The council would do a preliminary investigation to determine whether, as the code currently provides, whether the official was acting within the scope of their employment, and as long as they were not acting with actual malice, which is a knowing intent to harm someone, then legal counsel would be provided for defense of the ethics complaint.
Okay, good. Do we have any discussion by council members on this?
The only thing I was going to add, and I believe Arthur and Ron, you had sort of mentioned this in some correspondence, or this, administratively. When I had proposed this, I proposed it in a way. First of all, I think it's relatively innocuous in a couple of ways. One, we already have an indemnity clause in Article 3. And so in many ways, it could have been inferred that this was already implicit, but it really focused, it talked about state and perhaps other venues, but didn't really specifically discuss the ethics. Now, the other piece of it is, this is not an emotional piece. This is, as I had shared, there is case law in this. So this is not like we're making up and breaking new ground. There actually, Florida and some other states where there has been a public official at a municipal level who has been accused of an ethics violation. And one example was a violation of a sunshine policy, where they actually were, they were accused in this regard. There was a ruling that there needed to be reimbursement of expenses. So I think the other piece of this is recognizing that the complaints are far and few between. It might be like the recusal piece, but not the recusal, the hearing piece, that we all hope that this never, ever is used. But again, it just kind of closes a loop. And also, I think it perhaps provides some of that reassurance where we've heard some comments saying, well, they're reluctant. Folks, a few may have said they're reluctant to volunteer and they don't have recourse. Well, I think this closes that loop. And hopefully it's seen as a nothing burger, and we'll never, ever have to use it, frankly, just like the other places like state or other courts of law.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to ask if there are still a handful of residents there, if anyone has a comment on this. I see no hands up. So do we have a motion to introduce, what is this one called?
And Ron, I have a technical question here. Is this an amendment to the already introduced?
So, yeah, that's a question for the council to decide. In the past, our practice has been, if we're addressing a new subject matter not addressed before, and you want to allow more public comment, you could hold it over again for 30 days. But if you're treating this as an amendment to the already introduced ordinance, then it could be adopted tonight.
That I would like to do that, treat this as a amendment to the already adopted, not adopted, introduced amendment.
One technical or just a process question. So in the agenda, and perhaps it takes away some of that pressure, I think one point it says a possible delay of a public hearing on any vote until February. So with that said, I mean, if we don't have to split hairs, if you want to introduce this, then the February meeting is when you could adopt.
Right. We will use this to amend the previous amendment and then adopt the whole package next month.
And that you have to do it that way, because if you introduce this as a new piece of legislation, the next council meeting is not 30 days away.
Right.
It's 29 days
So
away.
this is to amend the amendment.
Correct.
Right, and as you said, it is, I believe you said, a nothing burger. It's not substantial, it's not really even substantive, so it shouldn't garner any.
Right, right. So do we have, I will move to introduce
an amendment
to ordinance number 2023-9-1 that was introduced a few months ago. I don't know.
And to continue the public hearing to the February meeting.
And to continue the public hearing until the February council meeting, where we will consider final adoption. Anyone second this? We have a second in Council Member Blander. All in favor? Aye. We have, you voted yes? Or was that?
I'm thinking I might
Okay.
abstain.
Okay, one abstention.
Okay. Sounds fun. I'll vote for it.
Oh, Joe, you did vote. That was,
Yeah, make it a yes.
okay.
Unanimous.
I just like the idea of abstaining.
Playful. Okay. It's not the time for playfulness. Okay, managers report.
Also.
Andrew, did you have your hand raised?
I sure did.
Oh,
on what? No, I raised my hand on adoption.
Oh,
I mean, on
okay, managers report.
Oh, your hand's up on Zoom.
Oh, you know what? Because when I do this.
It does it?
Yeah, also, if I do this, it was normal.
It recognizes it.
Yeah.
Well, you have a smart Zoom.
No, I think they all do this now.
Oh, do they? Oh, I didn't know that. Gotta watch it. Okay, managers report.
Ron,
Feels like a thumbs up.
I'm testing.
oh,
Oh, you're.
My
testing.
laptop must be too old.
Look,
Yeah.
if I do this.
You
look
thought
what
I
it
was
is.
being silly.
Oh,
I keep this up.
I see
Oh,
he has the
okay.
latest and greatest.
okay. Everyone's playing with their laptops. Managers report.
Okay, I want to give a big thank you to Erin Burns, the Assistant Village Manager, for covering the office while I was on vacation. She did a really great job and I really appreciate her. I really couldn't do this job by myself and take vacations, so I appreciate her. The village office will be closed on snow days. I think that should go without saying. The safety of myself and my staff is most important. And commuting to work across Rock Creek Park can be pretty sketchy at points, but there's not much snow, I'll be here. Otherwise, we'll be working online and we answer emails and voicemails 24/7. So feel free to keep reaching out to us. Under maintenance, the snow plowing contractor, Rolling Acres, has been very active. We've gotten a lot of compliments on the work they've done this week, especially on some of the hills, Dead End Raymond, for example. So I think they've been doing a really good job.
Can I ask one question on that?
Yes.
It might be no man's land, but the exit to the parking lot here in the back, to the left, that short piece before the first property on the left is untreated. Is that the owner of this building and the property that
I
is
believe
responsible
so. The
for that?
Brookville Market side, parking lot is done by their contractor. I don't think they do a very good job. All the parking spots are still iced
Yeah.
and stuff too, so.
Okay, just was curious.
Yeah. And then on that same point about the snow shoveling, the council, out of the goodness of your hearts, passed the funding to shovel sidewalks for the public sidewalks for residents that really needed it. We have about 30 residents that have signed up for that service. I built a list and the contractor was ready to go with that list. They snowplowed all the streets first with their machinery and then had to ask their staff to go back and shovel 30 houses. That was about 20 man hours to do that work. And the contractor informed me on the phone this week that they don't want to do that anymore. That was way more work than they were expecting, even though they told me that they were going to do it and we included it in the contract this year. They don't want to do that going forward. He apologized for that change of plans and said that he'll cover in the meantime. And I've even asked him to help me find alternative companies that would provide that service of sidewalk snow shoveling. So if there's a snow tomorrow, he's willing to do it, but we need to find a different company. I've already started reaching out to the other municipalities, asking them who they use. So if you know of a commercial snow shoveler business of some kind, we can't just use a kid. They need to be an official business with insurance policies and everything. But if you know of a professional business, please feel free to send them my way. That is a service that I want to continue to provide, and we even have more people signing up as the need arises for people. And we have people that are handicapped in the village. We have people that are elderly and literally can't do it. So
We need to get these little vehicles that are like really narrow, go on sidewalks that are,
the problem is if you have those,
how do you get them here?
well, and also when it snows,
It gets icy.
you're very, very busy. If you have a machine like that and you run one of these companies, when you snow, you have 100 other clients. So like Section 3 does it for all of their seniors. Every single senior in Section 3 gets their sidewalks shoveled, but they have a company. I reached out to that company and that company is already doing 10 other things every time there's a snow. So they're not available to take more
helping
clients.
tomorrow and this week.
Rolling Acres will still help
This next
until
snow.
we get a new contractor, but that's on my
So
list
keep
of
looking.
things to do. Yeah. We still have plenty of leaf bags. I don't want to have these in the office until next year, but I might at this rate. So if you need them, please come grab some more. There are a number of project updates for the Brookville sidewalk. We have hired Clark Azar and Associates to do the design phase of it. We worked with them before. We're very happy with their price. That was under $10,000 to do the design. So that was able to be approved. And we're having some issues setting them up and getting them connected with the surveyor. They didn't like the original survey that they got sent over from the survey that we had completed. So we're hoping to have a meeting next week to figure out where the gaps are and how we can fill those. Maybe take some additional pictures, or some of the utility lines and those types of things didn't show up the way Clark Azar expected them to. So there's some issues there, but we're working through them. And we'll move forward with that. Where am I? We collected a record-breaking $10,180 in donations to the waste management crew members for the holiday fund. Those funds have been distributed to the 6 people that, or the 6 shifts every single week that service the village proportionally. And I also want to note that Jose, one of the crew members that did yard waste and household trash, who has been servicing the village for 16 years, retired last week. And so he was very, very happy and crying at the check that he received from us. So that was a really sweet moment. And we'll maybe shoot out a thank you note to him in one of our newsletters or something. So that was a sweet moment. Composting, as we heard at the beginning of the meeting, is now free. We're actively encouraging people to sign up. Please tell your neighbors. It's a really good service and it's free to sign up. We might even do some flyering or something to try to get everyone to sign up. There are other municipalities that have a higher percentage of people that compost than us. So
they got started ahead of us.
Let's catch up. And then buildings is the last thing. I did include Doug's monthly report here as well with an update on several ongoing projects. But I did want to list out the 2 new houses that I mentioned earlier that are I've been told will be applying for building permits, demo and building permits. And that is 3415 Cummings, as well as 204 Oxford. Both those houses have been sold and will be demolished, and with new houses being built.
So just one little comment on that. And again, it sounds like this is going to be addressed, but I know we just passed this on the water retention devices, but I guess the concern would be the calculation and footprint, right? Because if we just pass something that is going to kind of permit then larger sizes, I just want to put that out there that obviously the job isn't done, and could we please take a look at these carefully before we
let's move forward with that.
It's underway. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. That was the first step. There's quite a few steps to go on that. And then we have closed out the permits for 3502 Taylor, the addition that was added there, 3500 Raymond, the addition that was added there, 3409 Thornapple, the enclosed porch that was added there, 3508 Bradley, and 151 Quincy. They're all done. 151 Quincy, I saw last night, is under contract. I don't know what that means. It's kind of surprising. It's been sitting there for a while. But I was really glad to see that one just be done with. And that's quite a few that have closed out. So we're kind of in a lull right now, but I have a feeling there's going to be some more projects coming along.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. The treasurer's report. We're doing great, right?
We are in good shape. So I'll make it relatively quick, but we are at the midpoint. So I just wanted to, share halfway through, and it's here, it's self-explanatory, but just putting out there that there really is nothing that is concerning or we haven't properly planned or budgeted for. And I do want to just put out you could see again, I think this is an illustrative example of the fluctuations in our income. So if folks may recall, last month we had a huge pot of our income that came in from the taxes, income taxes, and this month was like a trickle. So that's why you may see some fluctuations in terms of the current assets less reserves month to month, and that's why again you can't just do a straight line. Right. Here, I think the other pieces just to mention is that there's the first tranche of the ARPA funds, a relatively small tranche But then leading into what I believe is going to probably start next month, and Arthur, correct me if I may be off base, but I think we're going to start actually next month in February is the budget process for this next fiscal year. So that'll be a process where we have some administration, some public discussion, and ultimately an introduction and adoption of the budget. And finally, I think it's worth noting is the end of this month, we're actually going to be circling back with our accountant to actually go through the reporting of ARPA, because even though it's required to first report in April, we just want to kind of reconcile it with our profit and loss and balance sheet to make sure that all these numbers are being reported the way that they should. So with that, any questions, but it's all good.
Good, thank you. Thank you. Any comments from council members on anything? Any members of the Zoom community have any final comments? I see none. So with that, does somebody want to adjourn this meeting? Well,
Susan Khan has her hand up.
okay,
I thought I saw
No,
her.
maybe not.
I move to adjourn.
we have a motion to adjourn. We have a second to adjourn. All in favor?
Peter Khan and Susan Khan, right?
Peter Khan comes in at the last moment. Peter.
Yes, indeed.
The race to the finish.
I want to revert to the concern I raised a few minutes ago about the manner in which this was adopted. The election provisions were adopted this evening. First of all, let me say that I, appreciate all of the work that you and the committee have put in, and I think it's important to value the work of the committee. I think it's also important to value transparency. Arthur, I understood that you were saying it's the responsibility of the community to find the points on which they might object to an action of the council and then raise them rather than having the council go through changes point by point. And, it seems to me that in order to undertake that responsibility, there has to be a reasonable amount of time for people to see the document. And I would note that the council packet was not released to the community until sometime in the middle of the afternoon. It's a fairly lengthy document. There was no redlining. There were no indications of where changes had been made to the original document, to the committee's document. And so it was our responsibility to hunt out and identify areas in which we might have some concerns and then to raise each of them. And let me just say for myself that, I did not have the opportunity this afternoon to do that. And it seems to me that if you make major changes to a committee document that has been released to the public, and you wish to adopt the change, your changes, that you need to give the community a reasonable amount of time to look at those changes and to have some assistance perhaps in identifying where the changes have been made. And, quite frankly, the fact that it was released in the middle of the afternoon today, shortly before, the document was to be enacted, seems to me it was not transparent. It was not respectful of the community. Obviously, many of us in the community have real concerns about the way elections have been treated in the village, and some of us have strong opinions about how they should be conducted, and to have been given essentially no time to look at this, and then to be told that it was our responsibility to have carefully combed through and identified all of those changes seems to me inappropriate.
Your point's well taken. Perhaps when a couple of weeks ago, when our revised version was sent back to the election committee for review, we could have released it publicly. There's no reason not to. It was a document still under kind of a working document. That could have been done, perhaps in the future. It should be that. But your point, I fully accept your point. You're correct on all that. Okay, moving on. We had a vote to adjourn.
Move again?
I'll move again. I mean, I'll second
Everyone
again.
in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Move again.
Meeting is adjourned.